Coming up, Todd Liebenow from Forgotten Filmcast is going to be on, and we'll be looking at the Judge Reinhold action film Crackerjack 2. So a lot of fun there, a lot of fun conversation there. Now, I should point out that when we were recording that, there were a couple of internet drops on my end. We had some internet issues that day. So I think I did a pretty good job of splicing things together, getting us caught up. But it's one of those things that happens when the internet drops. It's like, okay, when did we cut off? When did we stop? Stuff like that. And one of the things I found was that my internet cut out. Because it was my internet that cut out, Todd was able to kind of keep going until it dropped on his end. But just keep that in mind. But for the most part, I think I took care of all of that. So, And then next week, Ty from Comeuppance is back on. We will be looking at, there'll be our Madsen Mayhem episode. We'll be looking at Assault on Hill 400, which also has Eric Roberts. Then we'll be looking at Machine, which also has Neil McDonough. So that'll be next week. And then in 2 weeks, we finish off the month of May with Will from Exploding Helicopter. We'll be looking at Roadhouse and Roadhouse, right? So the old Roadhouse and the new Roadhouse. And then for June, already got 2 episodes in the can for June. Scott Murphy from All 90s Action All the Time will be on. We'll be looking at another Seagal flick. We'll be looking at Pistol Whipped. And then Ty from Comeuppance, we just recorded our June episode. We'll be looking at 2 Dermot Mulrooney movies. We're looking at Ruthless, the Art Camacho movie, and then we'll be looking at Lights Out, Christian Sesma film. And then the rest of the month we do have scheduled, so it's just a matter of getting those episodes recorded. But yeah, I would say, at this stage we're looking good for June as well. So I mean, think about it. In February we started this move to every week with a guest, and so far February, March, April, May, we're good, and June looks like we're going to be good as well. So I'm starting to schedule out July as well. So we're going to keep this train running here. But so far so good. We'll kind of see how we keep going there. But it's been good so far. We've been able to get guests for every episode. I've been doing a good job of keeping up with it as well, which always helps. And then as far as the site, I think we are going to do The Weapon on Saturday. So again, I'm going to be out of town this weekend, so I think that's probably the best bet. I already have the images grabbed for that, because I had planned on doing it back when I had COVID, and then I lost an episode due to having COVID and had to catch up, and I just kind of pushed that one aside. So we'll kind of finally do that. It's a Tony Sheena film, has Cuba Gooding Jr., Jeff Fahey, Bruce Dern, who else? Oh, Richard Grieco. Yeah, you got to love Richard Grieco. So it was a fun, I think it was a more fun pod conversation than it was a movie, but we'll kind of see how that one goes. And then week after, according to the Letterboxd, I've got Bulletproof down. That was a Vinnie Jones movie that I did with Will on a previous episode. Will from Exploding Helicopter. We looked at 2 Vinnie Jones movies, and Bulletproof was one of them. So that one's down. And then after that, Enemy Gold, Sidara's film. I'm still not sure if I'm going to do those both. I think I'm probably going to stick with Bulletproof, but I might push Enemy Gold back a bit. I'm also been watching the Electric Boogaloo, the Canon documentary. So that one looks like a lot of fun to discuss, and so I'm going to review that at some point. But the goal is I want to get it done because it's on YouTube right now. I want to get it watched and out of the way before YouTube takes it down. So there's always that concern whenever you have something on YouTube. Well, it's a PM flick. Seems like PM flicks stay up forever, which is nice. But Electric Boogaloo, I'm trying to get a hold of that one for a while. So, it'll be more Dolph, right? We did Dolph in April, so we'll be doing Dolph in May as well. So we're getting more Dolph up there. So I think I'm going to probably fit that one, and probably maybe after Bulletproof. So this week The Weapon, next week Bulletproof, and then maybe the week after Electric Boogaloo, and then maybe we'll do some Sidaris in there. But you can always go to our upcoming reviews watch and see what movies are on there. Then there's the watch list, which gives you an idea of some movies that I have in mind that I'm looking to do. Also some that I might be doing with Ty from Comeuppance for future podcasts. And depending on who I'm having on for future podcasts, like if I've already seen the movie before, I don't include it in there. But if I haven't seen it, if it's a new one that I haven't seen before, I'll put it in the watch list to keep in mind that I'm going to try to do it at some point. So anyway, that stuff will be coming in the near future. I think that's everything. The only other thing is not this Thursday, but the Thursday after, we'll continue the DTVC Extra Series look at John Wick. We'll be doing 3 and 4, and again, still kind of in that process of playing it by ear on whether or not I do the TV show as well. One of the things I discovered with Peacock, so I'm traveling this weekend, thought it would be nice to download the episodes. Because Peacock is owned by Comcast, which Comcast is one of the cheapest companies. It's worth billions of dollars. You get the I get like it's like the platinum level or something like that, I get that level included with my cable because I pay so much for my cable. but there's an extra level that you have to be at to be able to download. So it's not like Netflix or Disney Plus or Hulu, Amazon, where you can just download the movies. No, you have to be at a certain level to be able to download, which is fantastic. It's very Comcast, right? It's exactly what you would expect from a Comcast company. So they're definitely, as the kids would say, they're really Comcasting it. Yeah. So I don't know. We'll see what happens, because one of the things I was thinking about too is that Disney Plus does let me download, and there's more Marvel stuff out there. So I know people are probably tired of DTVC extra look at the Marvel movies, but there's a part of me that kind of wants to finish off that Infinity Saga at least. So we'll see. We'll see what happens there. But yeah, but again, not this Thursday, but next Thursday we'll do John Wick 3 and 4. Yeah, and I guess that is it. Oh, the only other thing too, John Cross from After Movie Diner, he just recently posted 3 episodes that I was on with him. So kind of a sort of like a guest co-host capacity there. We looked at three different episodes. One is 2 Pam Grier films that we did. So those were what were they? The Arena and White Mama, Black Mama. I think that those were the names. So those are the ones we did. I know the movies we did to make sure I got the names right. But so that was a really great episode. And then after that, we did Predator 2, which again, if you listen to my Predator 1, Predator 2 DTVC extra episode, this one with John is actually good because we talk about some things that I didn't get into in that episode. So that's a really great conversation there. Definitely, again, I talked about how Robert Rodriguez didn't like the second Predator. We love it. So just spoiler alert there, we enjoyed it. And then Wings Hauser, we get in some Wings Hauser in the 3rd episode that he's posting. So originally we were supposed to talk about 2 movies. We were supposed to talk about Street Asylum and what's it called? Dead Man Walking, I think. Those were the 2 we were supposed to talk about. Then we also talked about a couple PM flicks that he did. We talked about Art of Dying and Living to Die. So really fun Wings conversation there. So definitely check those out. So if you subscribe to his Patreon, that's like $1, I think, a month is like the lowest tier for that. If you subscribe to the Patreon, you get the episode earlier. So it may not be up for regular listeners, but if you're not subscribed, make sure, or not, you're not subscribed to the Patreon, make sure you're at least subscribed on iTunes so you can get it when it does finally pop up. Also, a good thing about the Patreon, if you do subscribe to the Patreon, when we do our Belushi movies, which we haven't done a Belushi in a while, but when we do our middle-aged men watching Belushi, unironically, of course, when we do those, because they end up getting taken down usually, the full episodes are on the Patreon. So sometimes he'll put up like an audio version on his podcast, and sometimes Twitch will have the episode for like a week or so. Because I know the big issue, right, is that we do those at like 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, East Coast time. So it's not really a good sweet spot, right? I mean, I think for people in Europe, it's a lot later, because I know recently I saw in our analytics we have a lot of viewers from Germany, so especially our German fans that are there. Yeah, 9 p.m. is late at night in Berlin and other parts of Germany, Central European time. So the recordings are a great way to see those, but those are a lot of fun. I don't know if we're going to do any of those in the future, but that's another reason to subscribe to the Patreon, is that you get full access to those videos and can see the whole thing with the movie and all of that. So definitely check those out. But like I said, keep an eye on the Facebook. I'll post about when I'll be on for those. Yes, you can check those out as well. All right, excellent. Well, speaking of John Cross from After Movie Diner, we'll have him do our theme song here. And then when we come back, Todd Liebenow from Forgotten Filmcast will be on, and we will be looking at Crackerjack 2. All right, we are back, and we're joined by a very special guest. We've got Todd Liebenow from Forgotten Filmcast. Welcome back, Todd.
Great to be back. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Now, one of the things I love about your podcast is you cover movies kind of from all different times, different genres. So you've seen a lot of actors in your time. Um, when I say Judge Reinhold, what comes to mind first?
Well, I mean, well, first of all, to tie it in with the podcast, I've actually, and this is going back a long time ago, we did cover a Judge Reinhold film on the Forgotten Filmcast. We talked about Vice Versa, which of course is one of the wave of body switch comedies that came in the mid to late '80s there. Um, but yeah, I mean, I guess for Judge Reinhold, when I first think of him, I go to, probably the first films that come to mind for me are things like Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Gremlins, and of course Beverly Hills Cop. Um, I think of him as a comedy guy. I mean, I got to admit, when this movie came up as the possibility to talk about, I was like, Judge Reinhold is an action star.
Right,
I
exactly.
I didn't have that in my brain anywhere. Even though, I mean, technically, Beverly Hills Cop, you could consider that an action movie, but I don't know that he's not necessarily the biggest player when it comes to the action in that film. But I definitely think of him as comedy, even more so, I say, I guess my brain, I still kind of think of him as almost like a teen actor type of thing, because I think of Fast Times at Ridgemont High as such an iconic movie when it comes to the '80s teen films and what would come after it. I mean, basically, everything that I grew up loving when it comes to the '80s teen movies, the John Hughes stuff and all that, you know. Fast Times at Ridgemont High is the movie that started that all, and Judge Reinhold is a big player in that, and his part is probably, I don't know, I guess I think everybody latches on to different roles, in that film, the characters that they relate to, and I think I probably relate to Judge Reinhold's character a bit. Him and Rat probably are the two characters that I relate to in that movie.
Yeah, and, speaking of Fast Time, because I think this is probably like the best like context to put Judge Reinhold in when we're thinking about him as an action star is that one of the things I love about Fast Times as sort of a teenage kind of romp kind of movie, like you said, talking about how it kind of influences the John Hughes movies and stuff that come later, is that director Amy Heckerling, she really focused the film on the female lead in Jennifer Jason Leigh, where
Hmm.
a lot of these teen romps, it was like a male character who, like a Dave Marshak in Ski School or something like that. And you needed a special kind of older actor to play the older brother to really make her character pop the way it did. I think that
Hmm.
like
Yeah.
and he's schlubby, he's still kind of cool, right? Like he's still, I mean, he plays baseball, he's kind of, he's not he's not bad looking or anything like that, he's still cool, but yet he's also still the guy who's going to get caught by Phoebe Cates, pleasuring himself. He's gonna have that classic.
He's never going to live down that scene. I mean,
Exactly.
that's the scene. When he passes away someday, they'll be like, yes, he was the guy on the other end of Phoebe Cates's famous nude scene.
Right, exactly. It's funny. When Black Swan came out, when I was first seeing that, I posted a joke on Tumblr saying that like Aronofsky's original plan for that scene was to have Natalie Portman thinking of Phoebe Cates walking, out of the pool, and then he decided to scrap it and go with something else. And there were a lot of younger people on Tumblr who didn't get the joke. They were
Oh,
like, "Well, I'm glad he didn't go with that," or "Wow, that would have been weird." It's like,
it's such an iconic moment. The scenes that come to mind for me first, when it comes to, the iconic scenes of the '80s. Of course, it's Phoebe Cates coming out of the pool in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Now, that's not because of Judge Reinhold's role in the scene. It's because of Phoebe Cates, of course. But
but yeah, it took a special like Reinhold. It needed to be Reinhold in that scene, I think, to like kind of, I guess, to for us to want to follow Jennifer Jason Leigh's story. It felt like, and not follow Judge Reinhold's story. He had to do that part. That the other scene I think of is the end of the movie, right, when he's been fired from his fast food job and he's got the new job, and the guy's like, says 100% guaranteed, you moron, and he's like, Mister, if you don't shut, he's like wearing the pirate's outfit and all of that stuff. I remember my
right, right.
friend taped it from Fox. He taped the movie from Fox in the early '90s, and it was edited with all these dub overs. And one of them, the Judge Reinhold one was the best because he goes, "Mister, if you don't shut up, I'm gonna kick 100% of your face." And so like it became like our joke at school. Like he I remember he was so excited. My friend was so excited that he had Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and he was like so excited to show us all, like, "Hey, look, I've got it now. I taped it. You know, we can watch it whenever we want." And we're starting to watch it, and there's that initial scene where Jennifer Jason Leigh, you know, when she needs to get the abortion, and and Mike Damone is sort of skipping out on her about it,
Right.
and Phoebe Cates says, "Oh, what a fucking prick." We hear dubbed over, "What a fuzzy nerd." And we were just like,
People today, kids today don't understand what we had when we, taped those TV versions of movies. The one I always remember for me was when we taped Police Academy,
oh yeah,
which, you know, there's a scene in there where Harris is talking to Mahoney and, threatening him. And in the original film, it's, something along the lines of, "Mahoney, just remember, nobody F's with me." And in the TV version, they overdub it with a voice that sounds nothing like G.W. Bailey's voice. And he says, "Mahoney, remember, nobody plays with me." It's like, oh, TV cuts.
I, yeah. In some cases, like, because that version ended up initially, my friend was disappointed, right? Because he's like, "Oh, this is But then it became like this thing in school with my friends where we were all just like, calling each other fuzzy nerds and what kick 100% of your face and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And of course, nobody else got it because like if you hadn't seen his version, and so yeah, it's the thing too with like you said about TV cuts because it's like like Fox wouldn't show, Fox, on a Monday night now in the summer. I think it was like a summer thing where it was like, Melrose was on hiatus or whatever. They wouldn't, TV shows used or TV channels broadcast used to show TV, movies like this all the time.
Right.
And that's how a lot of us got to see these movies initially. And then it became like, I don't know, like the TNT New Classic thing. And suddenly these movies sort of almost got vaulted in a way, or, you just, TV channels were showing more like, I don't know, like, procedural cop shows and things like that. They didn't care as much about movies.
Yeah. I mean, I, growing up in the Chicago area, I mean, every night on WGN Channel 9, which was, not a network station, it was a local independent station. And of course, a lot of folks got that on cable TV around the country, but they would show movies every weeknight. And I mean, that's the way we got exposed to a bunch of these movies. My town didn't get cable TV till 1986. So, like that, you either were picking up things at the video store or you were watching it every night on TV like that. And I mean, it's wild when I think back to the versions of some of these movies that I have stuck in my head because I watched the version that we taped off of TV over and over and over again. I mean, like, and the things that they would leave in the movies versus what we would expect them to cut out now. I mean, like, Blazing Saddles is one I watched over and over again because we taped it off of TV. And like they cut out all the fart noises from the campfire sequence. They leave in all the N words.
Right.
It's like it was a different time. It was a different time. So
Yeah. Yeah, we had the same thing in the Boston area. It was WSBK. They had a show called The Movie Loft. So if the Red Sox or Bruins weren't on, because that was the other thing too, right? Is that back then local independent channels would air the local
right.
sports teams, right? It wasn't
Yeah.
like all the regional cable networks.
Yeah.
And
WGN showed the Cubs, that
yeah,
was yeah.
yeah, because I remember we when I went to University of Maine, WGN was included in the campus cable package, and so suddenly I was able to watch Cubs games on a Friday afternoon.
Mhm.
That was completely foreign to me. That there would be Friday afternoon baseball.
Yeah, that was my summer, man. If we were outside playing baseball in the street, and unless the Cubs were playing, we were inside watching them. So yeah.
Yeah, I still love the idea. I mean, one of the things I love about baseball compared to all the other sports is that you get these afternoon games in the middle of the week when it's not a holiday. I think
Mhm.
I understand why they don't do it because so many athletes are just used to playing, at night, and if you suddenly have to play on a Wednesday at 1 p.m., you're just like, well, I'm just waking up at 1 p.m. I don't want to play a sport. But it's a fun thing as a fan to be able to, like, oh, I can just turn a game on in the afternoon or something like that.
Well, and especially like growing up in Chicago where daytime baseball, we hung on to that for so long because the
Yeah.
the lights at Wrigley didn't go until boy, I don't even remember. It was the late 80s sometime.
Yeah.
But even then it was still kind of a tradition that they had at least one, maybe more daytime games during the week because that was just the way it was. 1:20 p.m. During the summer, the Cubs are playing, so
Yes. Yeah, because I remember Sammy Sosa complained about that. He was like, "Well, the reason why the Cubs don't ever win is because they play too many day games," which everybody was kind of like, "What's it's not Texas or Florida. It's Chicago. It's not like."
it gets pretty hot and humid there. But yeah, no,
Yeah,
that's not the reason. No,
no,
we
and of
love the
course,
Cubs anyway.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, and it was. I remember with the movie Loft, it was kind of the same thing. But one of the interesting things about Fast Times is that, like, the programmers at that time, for those stations, or at least for the one in Boston, they would have been older. They would have been probably early boomer, late silent generation, that kind of age. So for them, the 80s movies that they would show would be like like Running Scared, or
Hmm.
Wise Guys, things like Blues Brothers, ones that would appeal more to them. Whereas like a teen movie like Fast Times at Ridgemont High, they didn't show that. And so that was one of those ones that was like, I came into it later because it wasn't exposed to me earlier like that.
Hmm.
Again, like when those boomers, they're in the sort of I guess Generation Jones, right? The kind of that tail end there. When they started working at places like Fox and being able to program things, they were like, oh, hey, let's do Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Let's do. I guess Porky's would have. I don't know how you edit Porky's for a TV edit. That probably wouldn't have made
Yeah.
it. Yeah. Yeah. Um, but that was kind of the idea that I had with Reinhold. I mean, Reinhold was kind of. I mean, obviously, for me, again, because of that fact that I being younger and consuming the broadcast channels and not getting Fast Times that way, it was Beverly Hills Cop was the first thing for me. It was like,
Hmm.
okay, and actually seeing him in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, where he was a little bit cooler, was almost like a transition for me, where I was like, oh, he actually isn't just all schlubby all the time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's strangely too. Like I said, one of the films that pops into my mind when I think of him is Gremlins, which his
Yes.
role is pretty small in that. But I mean, you think of Judge Reinhold, and you think of he's this happy-go-lucky, likable guy, and Gremlins, he's the jerk, and I always remember his line there to Zach Galligan where he calls him Captain Clip-On because clip-on tie. Um, but I guess there was when you look up things about what got cut out of these movies that we grew up with, there was more to Judge Reinhold's story in Gremlins that got cut out. I guess there's a whole sequence where, like, as Zach Galligan and Phoebe Cates, again, we're getting a lot of Phoebe Cates on this
Yeah,
show,
exactly.
which I have no problem with that.
Yes.
But they're like uh, trying to do their thing, and they run into him. I think they go into the bank and they find him like locked in the bank vault or something like that because he's been hiding from the gremlins and such. So yeah, I don't know if that scene is out there anywhere. I think I've just read about it, but
I wonder, because Gremlins. I'm just sort of checking because I was kind of curious about the runtime on it, and it is like 105, 106 minutes, and I wonder if that movie was made today, where running times were a little bit longer, if they would have kept those scenes in. Like, if it seems like they like to push 2 hours for theatrical movies nowadays, whereas back then you would have been like, oh, if you're even for a theatrical film like this, they would have been like, oh, let's cut it down a little bit. We don't need it to be that long.
well, and it's the thing where you want to see the jerk get their comeuppance. You know what I
Right.
mean? It's which I mean you still get in Gremlins because Mrs. Deagle, gets what's coming to her. I guess maybe the filmmakers thought, okay, well, it's more important to see Mrs. Deagle get get taken out than to see uh, Judge Reinhold get taken out. Because I
Yeah.
mean he's a nice guy after all.
Well, and I wonder now that you mention it, because I never put those two together, but I wonder from filmmakers making the movie at that time if they're looking at the fact that 84 and 82 are really close apart. That it's like, boy, are we going to really? Do we feel like we're really punching down on Judge Reinhold that he has like the iconic caught pleasuring himself scene 2 years earlier? Do we need to really, really get him that? Like it's almost like
Right.
he's got enough for 3 movies worth of comeuppance.
Well, and I mean, I guess when you think about it too, I mean, Reinhold in a lot in these three movies that we've mentioned as the ones that kind of jump out: Fast Times, Gremlins, Beverly Hills Cop. I mean, there's plenty of moments between those two where he doesn't come off as well. He's got those weaker moments. I mean, Billy Rosewood. I love Billy Rosewood, but Billy's a little bit of a dork. So
Yeah, what was the one that I can think? The only time I can really remember him really being serious was is it the third one where the sergeant is like on life support,
I
or is it the
think
second one?
so. Yeah, the third one is so unmemorable. I mean,
I,
the things that jump out in my mind the most about the third one is Eddie Murphy jumping on around on amusement park rides and stuff, because there's a big sequence that takes place in an amusement park, and they've got that weird kind of it's not exactly a Ferris wheel, but it's a Ferris wheel type of thing with these
right.
cars that hang down. The Eddie Murphy is jumping from one to another, and that always sticks in my mind because they had one like that at the amusement park in the Chicago area where I grew up at Great America, and I always was like, "Oh, they're at Great America," but no, that was another park where they had that thing.
Yeah, no, that's a good. That was a great scene. Actually, I mean, that's one of the other things too. I think is that, of course, now with in a way, it's maybe a little bit better with CGI that you're not risking the lives of a lot of stuntmen when you're doing those scenes. But there were always some very inventive. There's some very inventive stunt coordinators who just like go to like a amusement park and be like, oh, here, let's do this.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, and even with, like you said, an overall unmemorable movie, you get moments in them. I think for a lot of these action sequels, that's kind of how it is, where it's like overall the movie's a cash grab and it's not memorable, but there are always these little inspired action moments like that.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to those 80s 90s films, I mean, there's so much to enjoy when it comes to the stunt stuff. This is one of the reasons why we're 30 years overdue for stunt Oscars, and we still are. I mean, like this last year, it was so terrible in the Oscar broadcast because they announced some new awards that are going to be coming up here. They're going to do a casting award, and things like that, but they still aren't doing stunts, and they poured salt on the wound again this year, where they do a little montage of stunt scenes and, oh, we love our stunt people and all that stuff, but no, we're not going to give them an award still. And it's like, yeah.
Yeah. Well, because the thing is, right, especially like between the stunt actors and the stunt coordinators, I mean, they are so integral to what has now become like this multi-billion-dollar like I mean, these franchises that are like they're trying to make these billions of dollars, whether it's Marvel or Fast and Furious or whatever it is, like without major, stunt coordinators and the stunt actors themselves, like there's just like these wouldn't work. Everybody talks about Tom Cruise, like hanging on a plane, which is great that Tom Cruise did that.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
you're right. Like if we're going to talk about Tom Cruise, that we should talk about all the names of the people who aren't Tom Cruise that are doing these roles for other people.
Well, and making it possible for Tom Cruise to do that stuff. You
Right.
think
Yeah.
Tom Cruise is putting in all the the ingenuity to make that
Right.
thing work? No,
Right.
that's not him.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because I saw Avengers recently. I'd never seen it before, so I was watching for the first time. And there's that scene at the beginning of the movie where Scarlett Johansson is being interrogated, and she kind of is like taped to a chair, and she gets out of it. She beats up all the guys and everything like that. And I was reading that the stunt people didn't like that scene because her outfit was revealing and didn't allow for a certain padding that you would normally have when you're doing stunt roles and stuff like that. And so it's like it's like that combination, like you said, of like, oh, all the work that's done to get Tom Cruise to be able to hang off a plane like that, but also too like having to deal with all these directors who are like, I want the scene to look like this, it needs to look this way, and being like,
Right. Right.
okay, stunt person, you just got to deal with it, as opposed to being like, no, you can't shoot it like that. She needs to wear a different outfit because we need, knee pads and things like that for this scene to make it safer.
Yeah. Yeah. No, these guys are miracle workers. You know,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and it would be not, I think it's, like you said, like from an Oscar standpoint, yes, like the movie we're going to be talking about, Crackerjack 2, probably isn't winning any Oscars, but it's still, obviously a lot of stunt people, doing a lot of dangerous stuff in a movie, even a movie like that.
stunt people who look nothing like Judge Reinhold, by the way.
Exactly,
There's
yeah.
some pretty obvious switches in this
Yes,
movie.
yeah, yeah. They kind of just they took what they could get in Czech, and I guess it was the Czech Republic at that time in '97. They took what they could get there for his doubles, and I guess when you're watching an action movie that's helmed by Judge Reinhold, if you're already there, if you're accepting that, seeing something else like that, you can kind of take it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Now, the other thing about this movie we're talking about here, Crackerjack 2, is there's a line in the beginning of the movie where Judge Reinhold's old buddy says to him, "Who rides a train anymore in 1997?" And it is kind of an interesting point. I mean, I don't know about you. I know, for me, I grew up in Maine, and 1997, I think the last time I had been on a train in 1997 was as a young kid in the White Mountains on the Cog Railway.
Mm.
So, I mean, imagine in Chicago, right, you'd be taking trains, but like
Oh yeah, yeah.
yeah, 1997 though, it actually kind of makes sense that like train travel was really starting to become, like less of, more and more lines were being shut down and that kind of thing.
Trains are very much a part of just my life, having grown up in the Chicago area. You know, my dad took the train to work every day for 40 years. The town that I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago is basically there because the railroad went there. And Chicago's a big hub. I mean, even today, when if I go there, if I'm going to go downtown for something, take my family to go see a museum or whatever, most likely we're going to hop on the train because it's just I driving down there's a nightmare, and I'd much rather take the train. And here in Denver, um, you know, we have a light rail train system, which is only about 30 years old, if even that. They started building it shortly after I moved here. And I love it. If I have the opportunity to take the train downtown, I will. I don't know. I there is a little bit of a fascination for me with trains. Um, my dad even had some model trains when I was a kid. I remember us going. There were these like model train clubs, and they would like have a big warehouse space where they had this huge setup. The layout as they called it, and people would sign up for times, and you go and you hook up your trains, and you'd go up in this little balcony area and pull the switches and all that, and watch your trains, going down there below. It was cool.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Yeah, because I remember that. I mean, so for me, it was like not long after this film came out. So this came out in '97. In 2001, they opened a train line between Portland, Maine, and Boston. And similar to kind of what you were saying about how the town that you grew up in existed because it had a train line that connected it to Chicago. Um, the connection between Portland and Boston grew, and there are some negatives to it. Like now, it's really hard to rent a house in Portland because everybody uses the places that they own, the properties they own for Airbnbs for people doing
Mm.
weekends from Boston to Portland. But overall, like the kind of growth that you saw, and the town that I grew up in was Portsmouth, or I grew up next to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, in Kittery, Maine, but 20 minutes north of that is another town about the same size, Dover, New Hampshire. And when Portsmouth started to get really expensive because a lot of people from Boston wanted to live there because it was nice, it's like on the water, it's a nice, quaint town. The combination of that and the fact that that train stopped in Dover has made Dover grow.
Mm.
It is one of those fascinating things that when you put trains in an area, people like to ride trains. It's just it's one of the. I mean, obviously living here in Philadelphia now, I take the train all the time to New York or DC or something like that. So it's very common here. But yeah, it's like you said, like it like in Denver, it would be interesting, like if they had a train that connected like Denver to like the western counties, or that kind of thing, like how it would
Well,
maybe grow.
yeah, there is something, and it's kind of an on again, off again type of thing. But there's like a thing they called the ski train,
Oh
which
yeah.
would take people out to some of the mountain ski communities at various times. Um, I don't know how popular it's been. I'm not a skier. I don't go up there in the wintertime. But I know that there are a lot of people though that just they love their cars too much and they want to drive up there despite all the traffic problems that I-70 has during the ski season. They still do it. I mean, if I was a skier and I was going up there, I wouldn't want to drive it. I'd probably hop on the train. So,
Yeah, for
but
sure. Oh,
yeah,
go ahead.
we do have other mountain, kind of train lines. There's certainly a lot of tourist, type attractions. Like if you go over to um, Canyon City, which is where they have the Royal Gorge and such. They have a train line that runs through the gorge. That's kind of a popular tourist attraction. And of course, you have kind of the Old West style train things. Not far out of Denver, you can go over to Georgetown where they have what they call the Georgetown Loop, which is a little steam engine line that goes between these two old mining communities. And it's just it's a neat thing to experience. They're not terribly practical. These trains don't run as an actual means of getting people from one place to another anymore. They're tourist attractions, but it's fun.
Yeah, when my buddy and I, when we were out in Colorado traveling around, one of the things was like a ghost town had like a train that you could take.
Hmm.
As like a tourist thing. My buddy, to be fair, because we were going out there mostly for hiking, what would happen is my ability to acclimate was horrible. So I would have to skip out on some of the hikes, and he would just go do them solo, and I would hang out in the SUV we rented. But then we sort of go around and do stuff, and he wanted to keep it quick. Like if we're gonna go see something like a national park or something, let's do it in and out quick. So like a long train ride through a ghost town. To be fair, I was kind of in a similar boat from him, but yeah. So some of those things we kind of skipped out on, but kind of did like other things, like Four Corners. You just like
Yeah.
hop in the middle there and do a push up in all four states. That kind of
Right.
thing. Yeah.
There's not a whole lot at Four Corners. It's like, yep, here we are.
Right,
Okay.
yeah, exactly. You're checking those states off the list because you technically visited. It's funny because I think there was one person who was working the state, one of the souvenir stations. I think it might have been Arizona or something. And every time you walked there, he would welcome you to Arizona. And so it was kind of fun that he had that kind of fun with his job.
It's good to take pride in your work. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and interesting enough, this movie that we're about to discuss here, Crackerjack 2, actually takes place I believe, in Colorado. Though
Yeah,
it's
I
interesting.
wasn't sure if
Yeah,
if it ever made it clear exactly where it was, but it sure looks like Colorado.
yeah, it's supposed to, because I mean, I think it was shot in like in like, I don't know if in like in Canada, but it also shot in Prague or in the Czech Republic. But it sounds like the way they're talking. I mean, but they keep talking about Banff, which is up in Calgary or like in
Right.
Alberta.
Yeah.
So it's like, are they doing a train ride that goes all the way from like Denver all the way up through the Rocky Mountains? Which I guess it could be possible, that that's what the idea is. But again, with this movie, that will be the idea of this whole train trip is I couldn't tell too if it was like a boutique train trip or if it was like an actual, like, this is a trip that people take, that aren't just doing like
Yeah.
some kind of fancy investment thing.
Yeah. I mean, they never really make it terribly clear on that. And the other thing that had me kind of scratching my head a little bit is, and I mean, continuity is not terribly important here. I did go and watch the first Crackerjack before I
Right.
watched Crackerjack 2 because I hadn't seen it either. And I was like, okay, I want to at least get an idea what's going on here. Um, the two pretty much stand alone, but I did remember that the first Crackerjack, where our lead character Jack Wilde is played by a different actor, of course. I'm sure
Yep.
we'll get into that,
Yeah.
but he's a Chicago cop in that film.
Hmm.
And now this film seems to be taking place definitely out west, Colorado, California, who knows, but it's mountainous, so it's clearly not Chicago. And like I was like, okay, so is he still a Chicago cop? Because like he gets to this train that is out in the mountains pretty quickly. I mean, we're talking about 800 miles or so between Colorado and Chicago. So I guess maybe he's been transferred. I don't know, because he sure doesn't seem to be a Chicago cop anymore.
Right. Well, because if he's a cop in Colorado, they don't talk. They don't explain at all why he would have transferred. I mean, I guess because the character, because the Carol Alt character is not the Nastasia Kinski character from the
Right.
first movie, because that might explain it, right? That like, oh, okay, he marries Nastasia Kinski and decides he wants to stay in Colorado with her and be a police officer there, and he's got a jerk boss and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's almost like they just sort of stuck. I don't know if because on IMDb they also call this hostage train, and I wonder if they originally were going to just call it Hostage Train and have it be this other movie, and then they were like, well, let's make it a Crackerjack movie because the producer is the same, Lloyd Samandel.
Mhm.
If he's like, oh well, maybe I'll just pair it up with Crackerjack, which I don't know how successful Crackerjack was that you wanted to um, pair this with it, but I guess that might have been the plan. But you're right, like there isn't a lot of explanation. There's one thread, there's one piece of connective thread between this and the last movie is that the wife dying. Um, but even that,
Even that, yeah, is kind of
right,
a stretch. Yeah.
right. It's like they, as the kids would say, they retconned the murder because originally it was Christopher Plummer that was involved with the murder in the first movie, and now it's this new Eurotrash baddie that we have. What was his name? Uh, Becker. I was going to
Hans
say Becker.
Becker. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
No, that threw me too, because I literally watched these one after the other. I
Hmm.
watched Crackerjack one night, and the next night I watched Crackerjack 2. So it's all very fresh in my mind. And I was like, okay, wait a minute. I'm pretty sure that Christopher Plummer was the guy that was responsible for the wife being dead in the first movie. And not just the wife, too. The wife and kids, which the
Right.
kids are not referenced at all in the sequel. It's all just my wife was killed and it's Becker. Becker was responsible. It's like, oh, okay, we didn't know about Becker the first time around. All right, whatever. They do use footage of the wife from the first movie, and it's weird because the shot they use of her is just it's the most awkward thing because what it is in the first movie is they're at like a gas station, if I remember correctly,
Yeah.
and the he's filling up the car and doing that, and then some bad guys somehow get in the car with the wife and the kids in it blows up. So and Jack Wild played by a different actor. It's oh, what's his face? It's
Oh, Thomas Ian Griffith.
it's the Karate Kid 3
Right.
guy.
Exactly. Yes.
um and he's like trying to signal her, get out of the car, get out of the car, and she's sitting there and she's just like shrugging her shoulders going like, what, and
Right.
that's the shot they use here in the sequel. They're going like,
Right.
what, which I'm thinking this kind of mirrors what the audience must be thinking, because they're
Right.
sitting there going, wow, what's going on?
Right, exactly. It's a lot of interesting stuff here. Well, yeah. Why don't we'll get stuck in here on Crackerjack 2. So we start the movie off kind of with this idea that again, it's understood that Judge. I don't know to what extent it's understood that Judge Reinhold is an action star in this very beginning scene because our baddies are kind of in this warehouse area doing things that baddies did in the 80s and 90s,
Right.
right? You've got
Yeah.
your sufficiently Eurotrash baddie, Hans Becker, played by Carol Roden. He's got, his ponytail, he's got his leather vest, he's got his accent. And the baddies are all in leather jackets, things like that, and they're moving things around, right? That's, big crates of things are getting moved around. There's a plan going on. And we see Judge Reinhold kind of spying on them from above in the rafters. He's actually taking pictures with a kind of a digital camera, I guess.
One of those that where you actually put like a full-on disc
Right.
into the camera, which I used to work with a camera like that at my job. That was the first digital camera we had, where we actually put a whole floppy disk in the camera, and like where we might put a memory card nowadays.
Yeah.
It was an actual floppy disk that we would put into the camera. So that brought back memories.
Yeah, it's a great thing because you see him doing it, and um like you said, like he actually pulls the car, like it's because this is supposed to be futuristic, so or not futuristic, but it's like the best technology. So it's like kind of like a big SD card, I guess.
Right,
Is
right.
is what's yeah, and
It's
so
pretty chunky.
right, exactly. So the whole thing is kind of bulky. He's there at that rafter, and then his boss, who's played by his boss is um he's played by a guy named Terry Barclay. The character's name is Parminter, which you got to have these great names for the bad boss. It's that's something like that. If you look him up online, he does a lot of like syndicated TV shows, 80s, 90s, procedurals, that kind of thing. So he's kind of known for that kind of that's kind of what he does. It's like if you couldn't get Robert Blake, you got this guy. I think
Yeah,
is
yeah.
right. That was the basic premise. And so he calls a raid on the factory at the same time, or this warehouse at the same time, blows up Judge Reinhold's spot, both figuratively but then literally, right? Because then Reinhold is like, well, I gotta give away my position to shoot the sniper here, because what happens is like the cops get into a shootout because the baddies recognize that the cops are there, and in the 90s baddies got into huge pitched shootouts with cops. It was the kind of thing that we think happens with cops, but really it happened in 90s movies, right? The baddies weren't
Right,
just like,
right.
oh, the cops are here, we need to get away, or we'll just get to give up. No, we're gonna have a shootout with them.
And it sets the tone for this movie where the baddies just I just spray bullets. They're just waving the guns around, spraying bullets. They're not in any way aiming.
Right, exactly. So here's where we get to our first really great stunt double scene that you were talking about, where Reinhold is up in this rafter area and he's shooting at the baddies. And so I think one of them has a rocket launcher, because that seems to be like the thing, is he's got this rocket launcher, which is like
Mm,
kind of like it's like the trump card, right, that you can play.
right.
The cops can't do anything about this rocket launcher. So he aims it at Reinhold, and it's like, well, I got to get out of here. Cue in a stunt double with like a black crew cut or dark brown crew cut, and
Yeah, yeah.
and he just jumps down, and while the
I,
explosion happens behind him.
it's a fun stunt, but I mean, like right away they cut and you go, well, that ain't Judge Reinhold.
Right.
It looks nothing like him. And plus the thing that's wild is, we've been in this random warehouse where, it's like, what is it for? What do they do there? Who knows? But one thing's for sure, and thank goodness, I mean, Jack Wild can thank his lucky stars here that one of the things they do have in this warehouse is an airbag, and it's right under where he needs to jump from, because I mean they literally don't even hide it. I mean, it's literally like we just see them jumping into the stuntmen's airbag. It's like it's just this thing that's there. Okay, sure, why not?
Right. Exactly. So yeah, and it's almost like a warehouse in the 90s could be used for so many different things, and so many things could be found there, that it's like, well, of course a big airbag would just be sitting there. You know what?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So once this whole thing gets kind of cleared up and the baddies escape, Parminter shows up, and of course it's a whole yelling at Jack Wild thing. But he takes it a step further, and he has Jack Wild arrested, which didn't make a
Mhm.
lot of sense. That he's a police officer who is also investigating this case, I thought, at least. But he's also being arrested, and of course it's his buddy who arrests him. So then of course he talks the buddy out of it. But that seemed odd. I don't know if I've ever seen that in a movie. Usually it's give me your badge and gun. You're on suspension. I've never actually
Right.
seen full on arresting.
Yeah, well, and it confused me a little bit at first because I thought, okay, are these like different agencies?
Hmm.
Does Jack Wild not work for these guys? They're both like, hey, this is my collar, or I don't
Right,
know, something
right.
like that. But yeah, it was odd to see him get arrested there. But then even where it goes after that with the whole like you said, he gets his buddy to let him go, and then he gets on the little speaker thing and is like telling him about the explosives in there, and the boss is all like, "Oh yeah, we better get out of here," and then the warehouse blows up behind him.
Right, because it's funny, like he plays to his ego, because he says to the boss guy, he's like, you got to get out of here. If this is Becker always leaves the calling card, right? That would, like, that's
Right.
the line. And the guy's like, I don't believe this guy, I don't think, and it kind of sets the stage that he doesn't take any information from anybody, which we get. This is like, I guess, Chekhov's boss who doesn't listen to people giving him information. And so then Reinhold says, "Listen, you could still run out of the building, and if I'm wrong, then you get to just laugh in my face and say I was wrong, and you can arrest me or whatever. But if I'm right, you won't get blown up if you run away." And he's like, "All right, I guess that works for me. Let's run. Let's get out of here." So So everything blows up, and I guess Reinhold is still technically wanted for whatever crime he committed here in trying to find the baddies. But he goes home to where his girlfriend Carol Alt is sleeping, and he breaks in because he lost his key, which is
Goes in through the window. Yeah,
right, exactly. So
and of course too, I mean, of course you're going to do this, I guess, when you have a former Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue model in the cast. But she's sleeping there in her underwear above the covers, of course, because, hey, you've got an opportunity to show Carol Alt in her underwear, so they're going to take it.
Yeah, and they, yeah, this is funny because she's almost like this for the next like 2 or 3 scenes.
Yeah.
Yeah, she has a robe on a little bit here and there, but for the most part, they kind of milk this for a good 10 minutes of movie that she's in her underwear because we get the backstory, right? So we get Reinhold, who I mean, Reinhold is in full on like 20 something late 90s gear. Like the only thing he didn't have was like the really wide leg jeans. These were just sort of like Gap wide leg jeans. But he's
Right.
got like the layered like oversized shirt over an oversized long shirt.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he also was missing like the necklace, like the chain necklace or something like that. But he was essentially like you could have seen him 2 years later getting arrested at Woodstock '99
Right.
for rioting. I mean, that's like the outfit that he's wearing here, and they're talking about whatever their life and stuff like that. And suddenly he has flashbacks to his wife dying and being like, "It should have been me. I should have been the one that died there," and that's where we get this flashback to the previous movie, and it's like, oh wait, so this is the same Jack Wild, but this is our only connective tissue, and it's completely different from how Thomas Ian Griffith was sort of managing those films, which of course they would have been raw at that time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess this is as good a time as any too to talk about just the odd recasting here. I mean, for all we've said about Judge Reinhold, he's a likable guy and all this stuff. I mean, people get recast in sequels all the time, but I never would have thought we're going to take Terry Silver from Karate Kid 3 and swap him out for Judge Reinhold.
Right, because Thomas Ian Griffith, he was kind of like with Jeff Speakman, they were tapped to be the next Steven Seagal.
Yeah.
And their movies just didn't work the way that they were hoping for, so they got kind of relegated to these movies. But it is a fascinating idea that it's like, okay, I can't get Thomas Ian Griffith for this movie for whatever reason. Who knows what the reason would have been that they, because I don't know what Thomas Ian Griffith was doing in 1997 that he couldn't do Crackerjack 2. But I mean, maybe that's that idea that this was originally not supposed to be, it was supposed to be like maybe a Judge Reinhold, TV movie that you could show on TBS in the late 90s. Maybe that was the original plan for it. And then they were like, let's package it at Crackerjack 2. But it's like, yeah, it's where you get that first moment of like, oh wow, we're really doing this. We're really doing this Judge Reinhold thing. And even him acting opposite Carol Alt, it's like we've seen so many movies where you have like a schlubby guy and a really hot wife. But this one, even for that kind of construct, this really stretches that credulity.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, dare I say, there is no chemistry between Judge Reinhold and Carol Alt. Part of that, I think, I mean, God bless her, but Carol Alt is not a terribly great actress here. I think she's kind of stiff throughout this whole film. But yeah, I mean, just that first scene with the two of them where, after he's snuck in the window and I mean, come on. I mean, he sneaks in the window and then goes to snuggle with her. And, of course she thinks some rapist has broken into the house or something like that. I mean, it's a ridiculous moment there, but I mean, they're sitting there on the bed and talking about things, and he's, trying to be brooding as much as, Judge Reinhold can brood, I guess. And the two of them just, they're sitting there next to each other, and there's almost like a literal wedge between them. You're just going, these two would not be an actual legit couple. You know, they just
Right.
don't work together.
Right, because even if you make the assumption that like, okay, well, he's okay, it's a movie, and he's this great action guy, and he's got like all this like male lead charm kind of thing that maybe she would be drawn to. Like, he doesn't even really have that, right? It's
Mhm.
like we have to take for granted that she sees that in him when we can't see it in him.
Right, right. Well, and it's also, again, kind of a letdown coming off the previous film,
Right.
because, as I was looking at this, I was going, okay, I don't know really anything about Carol Alt's character except that she sleeps in her underwear above the sheets. Could this be Natasha Kinski's character from the first film? And,
Right.
and of course, it's not. But that was a disappointment for me, because I was like, the first film. I mean, the first film's a whole nother thing. We could
Right.
do a whole discussion on the first film.
Right.
It's got its own craziness to it. But I actually think the dynamic between Thomas Ian Griffith and Natasha Kinski was quite good, and I liked Natasha Kinski in the first film. Here, the dynamic between the couple just doesn't work.
Yeah, because Nastasia Kinski, she obviously her dad, is one of the greatest actors ever in Klaus Kinski. That doesn't always mean that kids of actors aren't always the best, but I think in her case, she's like she's an actress first, and then like a model and all those other things second. Whereas Carol Alt is a model first, and then an actor. She was transitioning
Mm.
into being an actress at this point, or being an actor here, and so we're still seeing the transition. And one of the things I think about the transition, right, is that like when you're Nastasia Kinski and you've got experience at acting, same with like Christopher Plummer, you can take kind of lower grade material and punch it up.
Mm.
Whereas if you're still transitioning into being an actor, as Carol Alt was, you can't punch up anything, right? You're kind of like doing the best you can to try to learn how to do this yourself, and so it's just sort of like, okay, give me the lines and I'll say them as best I can.
The episode that I'm working on editing right now for my own podcast is for a film that actually features Natasha Kinski in one of her earliest roles. We're talking about a movie called To the Devil a Daughter,
Oh,
which was, kind of came in the wave of films that were inspired by things like The Exorcist, Rosemary's Baby, whatnot. And she's only like 15 in this movie, but she does bring a nice quality to her role there. I'm not going to say it's the greatest film. It's got some good things. It's got some really wacko things, but she is very effective at bringing that kind of innocence that you want to see in a character like what she's playing in this film. So I was impressed with her in that. And then I watched Crackerjack right afterwards. I was like, yeah, it's she still got it here in that one. And then, yeah, to go to Crackerjack 2, it was kind of like, bring back Natasha Kinski.
exactly. No, I totally agree. And I think that's the thing too, right? Is that she can, because she's such a solid actress, she can pull that she can make the chemistry. I mean, Thomas Ewan Griffith, I don't think he's a better actor than Judge Reinhold. I think
Mm,
he's an action guy, whereas Reinhold's a better actor probably,
yeah,
but like, this is not comfort, this is not the kind of, this isn't his comfort zone, I guess, so to
right.
speak.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
yeah. And I think Kinski, I think she could have probably made it more his comfort, made it at least feel more like his comfort zone to us as the viewer.
Yeah. One thing I will say though, while we're talking about kind of the comparisons between Judge Reinhold and Thomas Ian Griffith playing the same role, is that one thing that they did kind of carry over somewhat effectively, in the way this character is portrayed, is that both versions do have kind of a fun snarkiness to them,
Yes.
where the character does deliver, kind of these little lines here that have a bit of a humorous edge to them, and they're just kind of nice to have peppered throughout the film. And I was actually, I mean, I guess I would expect that more from an actor like Judge Reinhold, who, like I said, is more associated in my mind with comedy. I thought Thomas Ian Griffith did a really nice job with those kind of snarky, humorous moments in the first film. So I was pleased to see that is one thing that they did kind of, keep consistent about the character, even if, he went through some major changes as well.
Right. Yes. No, I agree. There's very much a going back to Reinhold in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. There's very much a doesn't anybody knock anymore kind of vibe to
Hmm.
when he delivers those
Right.
snarky lines, which makes them a lot of fun.
Which one of them is in the scene coming up here, where one of the baddies comes and attacks him
Yes.
while he's on his computer. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Well, yeah. So after we have the scene with Alton and Reinhold where they kind of give their backstory about their relationship and everything, she does forget to mention something about the fact that she's going away the next day, which is interesting, but she leaves that for the morning. But as the next scene, of course, is just quickly the baddie sort of setting things up. There's like this kind of this rich man who's bald and a woman in kind of like our femme fatale character who's a blonde woman in sort of I don't know if we call it leather pants. They were kind of like something from they were big in that style in the 90s. Like today it probably would have been like faux leather leggings or something that she would have been wearing, but for that time it was like these sort of like they're almost like a faux snake skin or something,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. The thing that stood out to me with her fashion more than anything, though, is the top that
Yes.
she wears with all the buckles going
Right.
across, which gives it this look almost like what the Beatles wear on the Sergeant Pepper's album.
Exactly. I was gonna say it looked like maybe something that like somebody who's born in the 1910s passed away in the late 90s and their family was selling away all their stuff that like they bought clothes in the 60s and never, you know, updated their wardrobe from the 60s through the 90s. And there's
Hmm.
like so the costume designers were going through a Goodwill in the area and they were like, oh, look at this, like this top would work. And she's like, okay, I can't argue with you, I guess I'm gonna wear it.
It
Yeah.
looks like it'd be a pain to put on, though, with all the buckles
Yes.
and straps that are on that thing. It's like, no, man, give me something simple. Just put
Yeah,
on
I
a
mean,
t-shirt.
I was gonna say between that and the pants, it's a very cumbersome outfit for her to be wearing, and you almost feel like when you see her in that first scene, it's almost like okay, this is the outfit she's wearing here, but then maybe she'll wear something, like there's a sense of like okay, maybe she'll wear something else after, and she doesn't. She's still wearing this. She wears this outfit for the entire movie. So, like you said, like every time I wonder if she just sat in the trailer in this outfit the whole time.
It's her signature. It's just like how, you know, like the characters on Scooby-Doo never change their outfits. It's the same
Right,
thing.
exactly, exactly. So
Uh,
we.
I
Oh,
want
go ahead.
to say though, I did like that character. I like it where you have, the bad guy's main henchman, hench person, whatever. And when it is kind of a femme fatale type of thing, I always think that's kind of cool. Um, Also, though, I'll throw out here at this point, and this is something that kind of continues through the movie as other characters are introduced, but was the casting director just looking for people that could do interesting accents? Because it seems like every side character, from our femme fatale to, the kind of scientisty type looking guy, who's setting up all this stuff. Even, when we get into our hostages later on, we've got this Australian guy, everybody's got an odd accent. And I'm sitting there going, I don't know that any of these are legit. I mean, my apologies to the actors if these are the actual ways that they talk. I don't know, but it's those kind of things where you go, that feels fake. You
Yes,
know?
exactly. Well, so with the femme fatale, that she's from the Czech Republic, so I would think
Mm,
her accent was real. Except the one thing that it felt like there were times where she was dubbed, um, and
yeah.
in that case, like if she's being dubbed, she's probably being dubbed by someone who's trying to affect an accent that, yeah, like you said, wouldn't work. And then like you said, yeah, you've got the computer guy who's the one who's like doing the hacking on one of this big bulky laptop. Yeah, his accent seems to go through all kinds of different Eurotrash
Right.
transformations.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So we kind of have this setup that these baddies are planning something, and it has to do with a train, and we kind of we have this basic idea, and then we go to the next day where Reinhold and Alt are having breakfast. And she just drops like, "Oh, by the way, I got to take a train trip today to like do some kind of investment thing, and yeah, I'll be gone for a couple days." And he's like, "Okay, thanks for saying." letting me know, but okay, that's fine. We do that. So we assume the two are connected, right? This train trip and our baddies plan are connected. At the same time, Parmenter apparently has not, or Parmenter hasn't stopped his crusade to arrest Jack, Judge Reinhold. He shows up at Carol Alt's apartment looking for him with his buddy, who's the partner there.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, everybody knows that Jack is hiding out there. Parmenter suspects it as well, so he follows Carol Alt into her bedroom where he thinks Judge Reinhold is hiding, and she's in her underwear again.
Yeah, she's still in her underwear. Yeah,
Right, exactly. And so we get the look on his face when he sees her in her underwear is like this combination of sleaze and uncomfortableness that you wonder, like, the way he pulls that off, if that's just really how he is in real life, because the combination that he pulled there was one that I don't know how an actor would necessarily pull it off so well.
it's a weird scene. Yeah, it's like you kind of are going, well, you know, she walks into the room. I mean, she's already answered the door in
Right.
her robe and all that stuff. And, it's like, and then he follows in there. It's like, you knew this was going to be awkward.
Right, exactly.
You saw her 10 seconds ago.
Yeah, it's the jerk cop thing. The way this movie does the jerk cop, the jerk boss or whatever cop, it's very unique in that he's just like, again, he's trying to arrest Judge Reinhold, which again doesn't make any sense, but that's part of it. But yeah, he's like there's almost like really nothing redeeming about him. And usually with these kind of characters, there's a redemption period. When we get towards that part of the movie, we'll see that even then he doesn't. There is no redemption for him.
Right.
Yeah, he's just and it is again this idea that like they couldn't get Robert Blake. This actor seems to fill that mold of like what Robert Blake would have been in a movie like this. Only he probably would have looked at the part and been like, I don't want to be that bad of a jerk.
Robert Blake is I've always kind of marveled at his ability to be, kind of that slightly slimy type of guy. And it's always weird for me too, because I always I'm a big fan of the Our Gang films, the Little Rascals. I grew up watching that. And of course, Robert Blake was one of the last of the Little Rascals. That's where he got his start. He of course just passed away in the last year, and when he passed away, I think that left one surviving Little Rascal that is still with us. So but I always find it wild when I see Robert Blake show up in movies and I go, oh yeah, that was Mickey from those old Little Rascals shorts.
Right. Especially Lost Highway. That's the one where you're just like,
yeah.
Yeah, it's like, wow, Mickey's going. Yeah, because we were talking about like the broadcast channels, like that channel WSBK, they would show Little Rascals shorts and also, Three Stooges, things like that. They would package those on
them together. Yep.
Yeah, on a Sunday morning, you'd get those. They also show the old Batman on a Sunday morning. So Sunday mornings were, you always think of Saturday morning cartoons, but those Sunday mornings on WSBK were kind of fun with those shows.
We got Rascals and Three Stooges every afternoon in the summertime. So yeah, that was a ritual for me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. Like my wife and I watch MeTV does Three Stooges on Saturday nights, and we watch those, and it's like that comedy that they did. It's just like it never went out. Like it's always still funny. Like we're still like laughing out loud at things that we're seeing on there. Like it never goes bad. I guess it's timeless. I guess.
I am wearing a Three Stooges T-shirt as we speak. So yeah, nice. I love the Stooges.
Yeah, it's so amazing. I mean, yes, there are moments where there's things that maybe don't age as well, but for the most part, it even being from a completely different time. I mean, a lot of the ones on MeTV, they'll show a lot of the ones from the 50s when they kind of got back together to kind of cash in on the TV thing. But even those ones from the 30s, it's like you'll see something funny, like you'll see like a Lucille Ball appearance or something like that. But it's like the jokes all still land really well. It's people talk about how like you can't do comedy today, but it's amazing that they could do it in the 30s perfectly fine, and 90 years later it's still working.
It's great stuff. Great stuff.
Yeah. Now speaking of comedy, we've got Judge Reinhold after everybody leaves, he's by himself in his underwear. I mean, he's got his shirt on.
Yeah, yeah. Carol
Yes.
Alt gets underwear scenes, and Judge
Right.
Reinhold gets underwear scenes.
Yes. And I think it's a very odd look for a guy, because we should point out this: when we say underwear, we're talking tighty whities. They're not white, but
Yeah,
they are that
right.
style of underwear. It's not boxers.
It's
Um,
briefs. Yeah.
it's briefs. He's in his briefs with a t-shirt with a kind of an undershirt, like a dark color, like a Hanes, gray shirt over them. And that look just never works. It's like women can pull off the guy's shirt with no pants. They can pull that off well, but it seems like for guys, maybe it's just my bias as a guy, that it just doesn't seem to work. But I mean, women out there listening, if you disagree, say, oh, no, guy in a shirt with briefs works. I think, did he have socks on too, or maybe he was in bare feet?
Oh, I don't remember if there were socks, but that would have made it like a million times worse. But
Exactly.
yeah, the look that Judge Reinhold is doing there, I mean, speaking as a middle-aged man myself, I mean, I am guilty of it many times. We all are. No,
Right.
any guy that tells you he hasn't been around the house looking like that is lying to you.
Right.
But at the same time, not a single one of us would say, yeah, I'm willing to do that in a movie because I know how bad I look like that.
Right, exactly. And so what's happened is the baddies have sent an assassin over. So Judge Reinhold is on his computer now at this point, the house to himself. So like you said, it makes sense if you get the house to yourself, you might be dressed like that, but not in a movie, right?
Yeah.
And he's on his computer, which again, this is 1997, so it's a big monitor, big,
Big.
the big stack and everything. And we get our first, we this is kind of maybe one of the few times where we get the idea that computers can do anything except for when they can't, right? That idea in movies. And we get kind of like a CSI thing where he puts the SD the big card. He puts it into the computer. So this is kind of a fancy computer that it had a slot for that card. That for
Right.
the camera. We get the sense that he just bought it, which he does tell us later that he just bought it. But he pulls up a picture that he took of somebody, of their cell phone. They're talking on an old cell phone at that time, and he's able to zoom in on this picture and get a nice clear look at the number. It's like one of those things where he just zooms, and then types some things, and it kind of clears it up, and he gets this
Yeah.
perfect look at a number. And as he's taking that down, the assassin walks in. And of course, why? No need to lock the door, right? You're in Colorado, I guess, in the late '90s. There's, no, nobody's going to lock the door. So the baddie walks in, and Reinhold, we don't really know how he knows the baddie's there. Maybe he sees the reflection in the big monitor screen or something.
Right.
But he throws his coffee behind him, and then we get Judge Reinhold in a t-shirt and briefs. Foo, I guess, because that's what the fight scene is.
I love that term. Yeah, let's
Right.
make that a genre. Brief
Right.
foo. Yeah.
Brief foo.
No, yeah, it's a strange fight sequence. I mean, it's really the first moment where we get to see Judge Reinhold kind of going into action star mold here, and I mean, he makes a valiant effort, but he's not a fighter. We get some moments that just feel a bit strange, and I mean, part of it is that, I mean, Reinhold's not really built for this type of action. He's a lanky kind of guy. It doesn't flow well and all that. It's not choreographed terribly well. They do the type of thing where the I think which one of I can't remember if it's the bad guy that smashes the chair or Judge Reinhold smashes the chair.
Oh,
but one of them,
Reinhold does. Yeah, because he tries to swing at him with the chair, I guess. Yeah, that's yeah.
And they show it twice. They do that editing technique where he smashes it and then they do a quick cut from a different angle and you see it smash again. And it's kind of like, that's always a weird gimmick when they use that one there. But the way that the fight ends, I mean, I don't want to steal your thunder here, but the way that the baddie is eliminated, I'm like, I don't think I've ever seen that in another film.
No, so to give people an idea, the baddie pulls a knife, and after some tussling, Reinhold takes the arm with the knife and kind of he kind of, I don't know, somehow he guides it into the computer monitor. I guess maybe the baddie stabs at him and he kind of just puts him, so he stabs through the computer monitor and is electrocuted. that's how he goes. And of course, Reinhold says, "I just bought that computer," which in 1997, that's no small thing, right? Computers were kind
No.
of appliances at that time, where you were buying them on payment plans, and you were they were thousands of dollars for that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. No, when I first saw that scene, I was like, is that even possible? I mean, no, I mean, like, what kind of force is it going to take for you to have that knife, to drive it into the screen of the computer? I mean, like you said, that's a big solid, that's like a flat screen or something like that. This is a big, bulky monitor. I mean, I have a feeling that the knife would just bend if
Right.
you tried to do that.
Yeah, because with those kinds of tube screens at that time, and again, those monitors were essentially tube screens. I mean, I think you could probably take that monitor and throw it, and the back might crack, like the plastic on
Mhm.
the back might crack, but that
Right.
screen probably wouldn't break if you did that. I mean,
Yeah.
you would have to really take a bat, and not even just take a bat to it. You'd have to really swing with some conviction to
Mhm.
get it.
Right, right. No, I don't think you could have the force with one hand to drive a knife into that screen.
Right. Yeah, exactly. No matter how sharp the knife is, it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like you said, it would probably glance off of it, and the hand would go up, and then that's probably what would happen instead. But yeah, instead the knife goes through there. And so yeah, so this is where we go to where Reinhold takes the information he has, and he goes to where the baddies were hanging out. And he finds the dead body of the rich guy that the blonde woman had killed earlier, and discover
And it is the guy that Carol Alt was supposed to meet with. Yeah.
exactly. So now he knows, oh no, he puts the two together. The train is where the baddies are going to hit, and that's Carol Alt's train. And he's like, "Well, I'm not doing any better than Carol Alt. I got to go save her."
Mhm.
So he's like, "Yeah." So he goes and finds his buddy, who has a helicopter. And so maybe this is a good place for us to take a break here, because this is where we get into the actual train action of the film here. So yeah, we'll take a quick break, and then when we come back, we will get to Judge Reinhold jumping on a train here in Crackerjack 2. It's the early 90s in LA. The war on drugs is raging, and Detective John Bainbridge is the LAPD's secret weapon against crime. Former special forces in Nam, he's a cop on the edge. When he and his partner Geary uncover a potential human trafficking ring, it doesn't take long before John Bainbridge realizes this thing goes all the way to the top, which doesn't scare him. That just means they'll fall that much harder when he takes them down. Part send-up and part love letter to early 90s action films, Bainbridge will take you back to the golden days of Canon, PM Entertainment, and AIP. You can get it in paperback or on Kindle and Kindle Unlimited from Amazon. Follow the link in the podcast description. My newest novel, Don's House in the Mountains, is available now. It follows Don Veazey, who after 20 years has finally made it as a writer, going from an AP English teacher to richer and more famous than he ever could have imagined. In the process, his wife Lois, feeling alienated and resentful of her husband's success, has filed for divorce, forcing Don to move to a house in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. With time alone to reflect, he's able to see how his new wealth and fame has affected his life in ways he never expected. Maybe the biggest of these is his new house, which is bigger and nicer than anything he's ever had in his entire life, but the longer he lives there, the more he gets the sense that it might have magical powers. But that can't be right. A house can't have magical powers, can it? Pick up Don's House in the Mountains today. You can find it at Amazon in paperback and in Kindle. All right, we are back, and yeah, we're getting to the meat of Crackerjack 2 here. And one thing I quickly forgot to mention was how Reinhold gets to the train. He goes to see his buddy, who I guess was the old partner who was injured. And I believe they talked about this in the opening scene, that there was a with Parminter, that Parminter made a mistake on something and he got his buddy injured, and he's like,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know, yeah, is it like getting his pension or whatever? But the friend is having sex. Is this woman on top of him? She's topless, so we were seeing full on boobs here, and they're having sex, and Reinhold just walks in on them and is like, "Hey, I need you to fly me somewhere in your helicopter." And the friend's like, "Well, wait, what? I'm having sex here. I'm like in the middle of something," and like doesn't care. You know, so
I At first I wondered if the this character of the friend was going to, I mean, since we're recasting people, I mean, we could recast anybody. And I thought maybe this is the brother from the
mm,
first film, because in the first film, part of the whole main plot of things is that Jack Wilde is overworked. He needs to take a break from the police force for a bit, and his brother and his brother's wife convince him to go with them to this ski resort thing. So the brother is a pretty big character in the first film. So I thought, okay, is this the brother? But no, it's just somebody.
Yeah, and so he, now in these movies, right, the friend of the hero often gets put through the ringer. Now in a darker movie, he would be killed. And
Right, right.
fortunately, he doesn't get killed off here, which is good. But he doesn't get the bet. It's always one of those things where the hero is just like they don't necessarily care too much about their friends. They care if the friend's being held hostage or something like, oh, give me my, you're going to pay for this kind of thing. But beyond that, they don't worry about putting them in danger too much, and that's kind of the thing here. So Reinhold doesn't tell his friend that his plan is fly the helicopter over, the train and just drop me off on it, and I'll take care of things from there. Because from the friend standpoint, that's not an easy thing to do.
Especially in the mountains of Colorado.
Right, exactly. And so they kind of try to work it. First, there's a tunnel. They have some trouble there. And at the same time, we know the baddies are on the train. We also know the baddies are setting up bombs, right? So there's all of this sort of like silly putty that's put in little squares in plastic wrap that we know is C4. And you just slap a timer on it, and okay, this is going to blow up at some point. So we know the baddies have some kind of plan in mind that involves explosives. And so the key is, right, we need to get Reinhold on the train before the explosives. So we get a little will they or won't they kind of thing. And finally, he gets on the train just as what we find out the baddies' plan is to blow up the one end of a tunnel, the Bryant Tunnel, as they say. And they want to blow up one end of it so that nobody can get into it. So the friend drops him off on the train. He's on the train. He's like hanging off the train here at the same point that the explosion happens, which catches the helicopter on fire. And we don't know necessarily if the friend survives this right away because
Right.
it kind of blows up off screen. And then Reinhold is down there underneath. The train stops at the inside the thing, and all of the passengers are ordered out of the train. And so I don't know at this point, Todd, if you were surprised at this, because I was thinking this was going to be Die Hard on a train, but it was actually Die Hard in a train tunnel.
Right. That's exactly what was going through my mind. I was like, well, that's not a concept I think I would have ever come up with. I mean, Die Hard on a train. Yeah, we've seen that. I mean, that's Under Siege too, as a matter of fact,
Right, exactly.
But Die Hard in a train tunnel. Okay, that's fine. And then I mean, I'm sure we'll get more into this as we go here, but as we find out, the tunnel it's not just a hole in the mountain. We've got there's this whole network of rooms and stuff. It's got all kinds of infrastructure there, though very clearly the filmmakers had, like, I could think, one room and one hallway, and we make it into a vast complex as best we can.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, now the baddies' plan is to get all of these rich people into this one room in the tunnel, and then have the train go on remote control out of the tunnel, so that the people that monitor that kind of thing think that the train is moving with all the people on it. And that's when somebody gets a VHS tape in the mail from Becker. And it's Becker essentially just saying, like, hey, I've got all these people hostage on the train. If you want them, if you want them alive, give us $40 million and a plane or something out of here. Classic kind of Die Hard thing, right? The fake,
Yeah.
one plot when it's really not that one.
And speaking of that too, I mean, we didn't mention this in the beginning when we, first talked about our lead bad guy here,
Yeah.
but I mean, talk about the audacity of a Die Hard ripoff movie to have who we think is the lead villain. That's going to change here in a moment, but to have our lead villain be named Hans. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, we've seen a lot of things in these Die Hard ripoffs, but to have them just go, yep, we're going to give you our own Hans. It's kind of like, well, you've got a lot of balls there. Come on.
Right. Exactly. Looks like the English would say, it takes a lot of cheek to do that in your Judge Reinhold Die Hard ripoff. Yeah, exactly. And you're right, because right at this point, Judge Reinhold is kind of setting himself up as the fly in the ointment. He's kind of hiding underneath things. He's sort of, sort of keeping himself hidden from what's going on, but he's keeping an eye on what's happening. All of the people are rounded into this area, and then, character actor Michael Sarrazin is there in a suit, and he's talking to Carol Alt and the other hostages about the tunnel. And we think like, okay, maybe he's going to be the guy to help them get out, but plot twist, he's actually the big baddie, I guess. Or
Right.
it's like he's hired Becker's baddie crew to like it's almost like they do like baddie contract work. I don't know exactly how it works, but that's the idea, I guess.
And it was jarring to kind of have a shift here, and we're like, okay, I'm, we've got the Euro trash type of guy, okay, he's the lead bad guy. That's, universally accepted. But then this other guy enters into things, and I mean, he's just kind of bland, so much so that his name is Smith.
Right.
That's just our bad guy, Smith.
Right. And it's essentially like, and people listening here probably recognize him maybe from like the Peacekeeper, a Dolph Lundgren movie that had Montel Williams in it. It probably wouldn't remember him because you'd be remembering Montel Williams and not Michael Sarrazin. But you're right. He's just like this kind of one note in like a white suit who or like I don't know if it's a linen suit. I mean, there's something very like Miami Vice-ish about him as a baddie.
Mm-hmm.
He seems to have a thing with our femme fatale, which doesn't make a lot of sense because again, the vibe we're getting is that he's sort of contracted this thing out to these baddies as opposed to like they're all in the same team. And his goal is that to get each of these rich people to wire their money to him. That's the goal. And our computer baddie, Krill, is there on his laptop, and the idea is that he can I guess make these transfers happen and then burn it to a CD, and they can take that CD somewhere else, and it's got all the money on it. That's the idea. So we're
Right.
sort of creating a MacGuffin here at the midway point here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and jumping back to what you're saying about kind of the relationship between Smith and the femme fatale, I wanted a bit more there.
Yes.
Like I said, there's kind of like the hint that there's a relationship there. Something like I was like, okay, well, this is going to be like Jeremy Irons and the femme fatale in Die Hard with a Vengeance type of a thing, and I think that might have been what they were going for, but they just didn't follow through on it.
Yeah, and that's the thing with this movie is that there are a lot of not follow throughs at this point, because we get introduced to, like you said, we get to introduced to all of these rich people who have weird accents, and we have the Australian guy who's like, I'm not taking this credit from you, kind of thing, and he's got a girlfriend who's not his wife, and they first start with him. Well, no, actually, they first start with Carol Alt, right? Because she, I guess, is like a financial manager for a whole bunch of rich people. So they bring her into this room and essentially say, if you want to live, you've got to give us the codes. And she gives them the codes. And it's always interesting with these bank things that there's these like really easy codes, and it's just a matter of a few clicks and money gets moved around, and and it's all done. And but that's the idea, is that she's doing that, and then they bring the Australian in with his girlfriend. She sells him out and says that his codes are on a crown and his tooth or something like that. Which, yeah, I don't understand why would you even do that? It doesn't make any
No,
sense.
yeah, it's one of the strangest things I think I've ever seen in one of these movies. I mean, we go in some strange directions, but the idea that you've got your codes or your password or whatever engraved on your teeth, I was like, yeah, there's no purpose to that. How on earth is that effective in any way? And of course, my brain also was thinking, well, in today's world, not so much in the 90s here, but in today's world, you're getting something every 30 days telling you, oh yeah, it's time to change your password. I mean, once he got a different password on every one of his teeth.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and so we also get that thing of the person getting killed as a hostage is an agent in their own demise, right? Because this Australian guy just can't stop being a jerk, and when when they bring him and his wife back into the room of the hostages so they can bring another hostage to give them their codes to transfer the money, he starts giving them lip and he starts, causing issues, and our femme fatale just shoots him, just
He's
like, and
he's the Ellis of
right.
this. I mean,
Yes.
in this movie, you draw the comparisons to the different roles of Die Hard, and he's Harry Ellis in this. So,
Yeah, I think if you made Crackerjack 2 today, he would be a crypto bro probably.
yeah, yeah.
Now, the other thing, of course, is that Judge Reinhold at this time is kind of fishing around to try to find his way through things, and he finds his way into the room where everybody is being held hostage. And there's kind of this like reunion with Carol Alt, and he's like talking with her and all stuff, and she seems very relieved, like, oh, he's gonna save the day kind of thing. But it's also kind of a weird thing because it's like, okay, you're here, and the baddies are out there, so maybe you can confront them somehow. But
Mhm.
no, he just kind of hangs out with them for a few minutes. We meet this guy who's supposedly an expert on trains, who gives him some intel about like places that he can go to find things or whatever.
Right.
And then he just climbs up on top of the lockers and escapes back through the tunnel that he was in before, to, I guess, be our fly in the ointment.
Yeah, and he gives them some information about like how to access some wires and like tap out Morse code to
Yeah.
to folks and try and get some messages out and all that kind of stuff. So
Right, which reminds me that I forgot we had Chekhov's Boy Scout or Chekhov's Cub Scout.
oh, we've got the kid. Yeah.
Right. So back at the station that kind of monitors all the trains, one of the guys that's working there's like, oh, I've got my nephew with me, and I've got to, like, I got him for the night, so we got to, have him. Oh, well, just keep him out of the way, whatever. Okay, fine, he's there. And then Parminter shows up as the police officer, and he's just being the jerk the whole time about all this stuff, and he's doing his whole jerk routine. But we're wondering how this kid is going to be involved, and so he's got to play a part at some point. And now we've got the combination of the Morse code and Chekhov's Boy Scout, because I don't remember. I did Cub Scouts for 2 years. I guess so. I guess I didn't get far enough to the Morse code badge.
No.
For that.
Yeah. No, I was in that too, and I don't remember that at all. I could do SOS, and that's about it. But and that's a weird moment too. Is the guy is explaining to Judge Reinhold, but you can do this thing and use Morse code, and Reinhold's like, oh yeah, Morse code. Yeah, I was a Cub Scout, and it's almost like a little snarky. Like you almost go, is he being sarcastic here? I don't know. But with the introduction of the kid too, I was like, okay, well, something surely is going to happen here in this control room, because you can't bring a kid into an environment where the kid wouldn't normally be and then not have the kid get into peril in some way.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
not really.
Right, exactly. It's like Chekhov's kid, but the way that they Chekhov's the kid is, yeah, it's a complete, it's very different. Yeah, and I'm trying to think. Oh, the other thing, of course, we find out that the friend isn't dead. The friend is at the tunnel now where it's covered in rubble, and he is kind of digging his way out of that. He's digging everything out of that. Also, I guess once the train makes it out of the tunnel, they close the other end, so they do the explosion, and so that the tunnel is completely sealed on both sides. And yeah, the friend is just sort of going to work on some, what would you say, like foam bricks, pretending that they're as
Yeah,
heavy as possible.
I was gonna say, yeah, is rubble code for styrofoam? Because
And of course he's complaining, Jack, thanks a lot, Jack. My plane destroyed or stuff like that. But he's going to work. So we also have Chekhov's rubble clearing, right? Because
and why is he doing it too? Because it's kind of like he doesn't know if Jack's made it, if Jack's alive. For all he knows, Jack is on the train and the train is miles away. Why is he digging into the tunnel?
Right, exactly. This is kind of a funny thing. Like I saw Ethan Hawke on IMDb, like a quick, like reel or something of him doing an interview where he talked about how directors that weren't actors before don't always like actors because actors are always saying, what's my motivation here? Why would I be doing this? And you get the sense that the friend was not an Ethan Hawke kind of actor where he would be like saying to director Robert Lee, why am I doing this? Why would I be pulling this rubber? I don't know if he's, all that kind of stuff. It's like, no, just clear the rubble. Just start pulling the styrofoam
Yeah.
away. And let us worry about that. I think, yeah, Ethan Hawke probably would have asked, like, what is my motivation here?
It's like, well, somebody's got to do it. Might as well get started doing my
Exactly.
civic duty here.
Right. Right. Exactly. Now, as the fly in the ointment, uh, Reinhold is starting to cause some issues, right? He's running into some baddies here and there, and as he's trying to find his way to a phone line, right? Because I guess the phone lines have all been cut, and he's trying to find one that he can do his Morse code thing with. And so he's had some interactions where he's taken some of them out. I was trying to remember how some of them went. I know there was the one baddie that he set on fire. He was just
Yeah,
like,
I was
"Here's some
gonna say
gasoline here."
they
Yeah.
kind of blur together, and a lot of it is just bang, 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 bang. But yeah, there is one guy that bursts into flames, which is it's probably one of the biggest stunt moments of the film. They spent a lot of the stunt budget on that one.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. They're like, we got the ability to have the flaming stuntman. We're going to use it here, which happens in a lot of these movies. It's sort of like, okay, we've got this here. We're gonna just like the exploding helicopter. We're gonna have an exploding helicopter. If we've got the ability to, we're gonna have it.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. So at this point, they've discovered that it is Jack. So Hans Becker starts complaining to Smith, like, and Smith gives him, kind of gives him a talking to as his superior, which I don't know if you need to put Hans Becker on a performance improvement plan. I guess if he's a contractor, you can't really do that. But maybe you say, I'm not going to work with your firm again. But right, he's like, you never leave anything to chance. And it's like one of those things where like they Hans Becker went through with the plan, even though the fact that his friend didn't make it back from the assassination attempt on Reinhold, because of course he was electrocuted. He just sort of says, "Well, it doesn't matter whether he makes it back or not. It doesn't matter. We're going to go. By the time we're on the train, it's not going to matter because he can't conceive of an idea that like Judge Reinhold would be hanging on to the skids of a helicopter and get dropped onto the train. He's thinking like
Yeah.
once we're in motion, we're all set to go. And Smith's like, no, you never, you never allow for any whatever, kind of thing, which is kind of funny. Like the idea that like Smith would be like, you never allow for any of like, whatever, when the whatever is Judge Reinhold being dropped on a train with from a
Right.
helicopter.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's, it's not a 0% chance, but it's pretty much a 0% chance. If you're Hans Becker, you made a good calculation there, I think. So
Yeah.
I don't know that you need to get on him that much. I think, again, a little harsh if he's getting put on a performance improvement plan. But anyway, so Hans and his crew are trying to get Reinhold, while Sarrazin and his computer guy are trying to get as much money as they can from these baddies. We get these little stories, like one of them apparently is into the mob for money. And so it's like one of those things where like, oh, well, if he gives this money up, the mob's going to be angry at him because it's
Hmm.
mob money. So there's that piece. But again, it's like these little threads that we get here or there. And I guess I don't know if the idea is supposed to be that we don't feel bad for these people for losing their money. But that kind of doesn't help us either, right? Because we want to feel bad that these people are losing their money. Like we should be feeling bad for them.
It seemed a little bit like it was an attempt to kind of flesh out the characters, our hostages a bit, which that's not so much. I mean, I guess we get a little bit of that in Die Hard, but you think about that's more like in the vein of a movie like Speed, where
Yes.
we have the different passengers on the bus, and we're getting bits and pieces of their backstory, and when all is said and done, we really love Alan Ruck, and we and Ortiz and all these guys, we're like, oh, those were cool characters. And so there's little bits and pieces here where they're trying to flesh out these people that are in there, but it never quite takes hold, with perhaps the exception of the guy that talked about the Morse code, which of course we have a revelation about that character that I was kind of like, oh, well, that's kind of fun,
Right, exactly. Yeah, it was one of the fun moments in this movie when we get that revelation. And so yeah, I mean at this stage, right, Judge Reinhold, now that he knows that all the people are being held in this tunnel and that Hans Becker is behind it, he finds a telephone where it's got the wires and he starts sending out Morse code signals to the train operation kind of central place there. And at that time, Parmenter has already greenlighted a strike plan to, again, I guess, put SWAT team members on this train and take it over. That's his plan. And so Reinhold does
which by the way, can we say, is he even in his jurisdiction anymore?
right.
I mean,
yeah, that was something I was wondering too. Like, I guess the train didn't get that far out before the hostage thing happened. Right, exactly. Like, he's just, there he is. He's making the call on this. And again, to your point earlier in the film, it would have made more sense if he was an FBI guy giving Reinhold
Right.
a hard time.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
it makes all of it make more sense. They wanting to arrest him, the being a jerk, the taking over the cases, and being in this situation here all makes much more sense if he's an FBI guy.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So one of the things here, Alfred Hitchcock, kind of on a quick aside, Alfred Hitchcock once said in terms of filmmaking that, when he builds suspense, like he might have a scene where you've got two people sitting at a table and there's a bomb underneath the table. And he said his audience would hate him if he let these two characters blow up, knowing the bomb's underneath the table. So he's got to build the suspense as much as possible and then get them out of there somehow, because if he blows those two people up, the audience will kill them. Well, I kind of feel like we get that situation here, right? Where the kid is picking up the Morse code signals. He's writing them down. He's trying to tell people. At first, his uncle doesn't want to hear from him. Now the uncle does. Now Parmenter doesn't want to hear from him. And it's like, if the whole time we know that these people are getting blown up, that this SWAT team that's going to get on the train, they're going to blow up, right? That's going to happen. And it's almost like the two people sitting at the table that Hitchcock talked about, where it's like, you got to get them out of there somehow, right? Because the audience is not going to be happy with you. I don't think Hitchcock would have approved of this, because what happens is that Parmenter ignores the kid, doesn't want to hear from the kid who's telling him that, like, hey, the train's empty and all that. By the time he hears it, it's too late, and the two helicopters blow up and all of the servicemen are killed.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, again, this is kind of going back to, where we're pulling from Die Hard.
Yeah.
What are the things that we are, just kind of copying and reworking. And this is the Johnson and Johnson sequence,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, it's you could see Reinhold, on the phone talking to Hans, like, hey, pull back, you made your point, pull back, I'll take it under advisement, hit him again, it's like,
yeah.
right? The quarterback is toast.
But I mean, part of what makes the Johnson and Johnson sequence, though, is that what makes that work is that we are so charmed, maybe in a negative way, but we're charmed by Robert Davi. We're charmed by why can't I remember the other guy's name?
Yes, I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, we like those characters, and then to have that sequence go disastrously, that's what makes that whole thing work.
Right.
Here it's just random helicopter pilots.
Right. Well, and the other thing too about this, right, is that like you said, it's random helicopter pilots. Also, right, like you've got is it Paul Glasser? The bad, the angry cop, the Parmenter character. The principal from Breakfast Club.
Oh yeah, right. Paul Gleason. Yeah.
Gleason. Yeah, Paul Gleason. Yeah, so you'd see him, saying, your mind bender, 2 weeks, right? You get the bull, you get the hordes. But he's the Parmenter role, and like you said, he's much more fun too. And our Reginald Vell Johnson is there cleaning up foam rubber, I guess. In the rubble area. So we kind of, our characters are not being used right as well. But we get that scene with Parmenter where he realizes he's just put these guys into an ambush. And his mindset isn't like, oh my God, what have I done? I've just killed all these innocent people. It's, I'm finished, right? Like, my career's done. And it's almost like that's the way that they get him out of the scene, out of the movie, so that Judge Reinhold can be be an unfettered hero. It's a weird way to be like, okay, it's like a zero-sum game. It can either be Reinhold or Parmenter that are running the show here. It could have just as easily been, right, that like Parmenter listens to the kid, realizes, calls it all off, and says, okay, let's let Jack take over here. And he sort of changes course. But instead it's like, okay, I got all these people killed, so I'm just going to walk away. And he just like leaves the room. He leaves the control room, and that's it.
Yeah, he has no moment of redemption. So yeah, that is a bit awkward.
Yeah, exactly. So at this point, things are kind of moving right now. We know, okay, it's up to Judge Reinhold to save the day. Um, he's experienced a couple explosions at this point. I think I'm trying to think if it's this point. No, okay, trying to think when he gets completely covered in soot. It's when he's just like he's just
Mm.
completely just there. Because I was thinking, I can't imagine an action hero other than Judge Reinhold that would agree to do a scene like that where he's just completely just like completely a mess like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, your John McClane's and that become a mess, but it's still like, we've still got the Bruce Willis thing going on there. It's we don't just roll around in the dirt like we're in 101 Dalmatians or something like that.
Exactly. Right. Well, going back to the Three Stooges, right? He looks like somebody gave him a trick cigar that blew up and
Yeah,
just,
yeah.
right. That's the aftermath, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he goes back to the hostages to say, like, hey, I've kind of figured out what's going on here. And this is when we get the reveal, right? That our expert is not an expert, or he's an expert with model trains, right? He
Hmm.
essentially he's Reinhold's trying to figure out because he's figured out that what they want to do is they want to blow the tunnel open so the reservoir floods it. So it kills all the hostages because they get flooded in the reservoir. That's the goal of the baddies here, and they'll be long gone. They'll have long escaped before that. So the thing is, how do we get them out of here? But also, when this thing blows, how much time do we have before it completely fills with water and everybody's drowned? And he asks the expert guy, well, can you calculate that for us? And he's like, I've never done a calculation that big before. We don't really know what he means until he opens up his briefcase and we see a collection of model trains.
Hmm. Well, and I love his line though, where he says, "Well, it's really just a matter of scale," and
Right.
I was like, I don't know if that's entirely true, but
Right.
I like the line. I like the
Yeah,
reasoning. Yeah.
exactly. It's funny because we get these moments in this film of kind of like not all the jokes land, right? I mean, like the friend who's like removing the rubble and complaining about Judge Reinhold. It's kind of like, what is going on here? Like, what is he's supposed to be comic relief, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense. But this one landed. I think it was a funny scene.
Yeah, I would say this model train guy is the better character. He's the
Mhm.
as kind of the comedic type relief. The
Yeah,
the kind of bit awkward, slightly dorky type of guy, and that
right.
the buddy with the helicopter who's lifting styrofoam boulders. He just gets annoying. So,
Right, exactly. Right, which at the very end of the movie, he's really annoying. Yeah,
oh
there's
man.
yeah. There's a scene at the end that's just absolutely horrible. But so there's a few things that happen here. One is that okay, the baddies have got all the money that they need, right? And so they've taken their disc off. The computer guy for some reason, escorted by a couple of baddies, he's supposed to take the computer disc to a satellite, I guess, and
Right.
that's going to up and I don't even know if they're using the word upload with this, but it's going to send the data somewhere that actually makes it real for them to collect the money.
Yeah. Yeah. High tech stuff for the 90s. Yeah.
Exactly. So when a disk gets removed from something and it's being transported somewhere, something's got to happen to that disk. Going back to Alfred Hitchcock, right? It's our MacGuffin. And when the guys, there with his the two henchmen are taking him there. They run into our fly in the ointment and Judge Reinhold, who's completely covered in soot and he's just a complete mess. And he dispatches the two baddies, and then he essentially threatens our computer guy, like, "Hey, if you don't give me that disc, I'm going to kill you." Or I can't remember. Does he take it? I can't remember if he took it and then just doesn't give it back, or if he threatens him and takes it off him. I can't remember exactly how
Yeah,
that
I don't
worked.
remember exactly either. What I was trying to remember too, he gets the disc and he just has the disc. There's not like a case or anything, right?
Exactly right.
I'm like, you know, even then, you put a CD in a case. I mean,
Exactly.
handled by the edges and all that kind of
Right.
stuff, man. It's
Yes.
not that
Right. 'Cause
hard.
yeah, because they're just like he's just holding it in his fingers and stuff like that. And you're right. Like if this is supposed to have all this important information on it, it's like, yeah. I guess I'm trying to think if '97 would have been too soon before that time when you'd have like that stack of CDs that you'd burn, that would
Oh
come like on
yeah.
a circular thing. I actually have one. I can see one literally like right now, next to 'cause my wife used to make mix CDs, and so I can literally in the office here see like it's covered in dust. Nobody's touched
Yep.
it in years. But because I'm 10 years ago we'd still make mix CDs, and now it's like everything's playlists and stuff like that. But even then, right? Like you could get like a sleeve or something that you'd put it in. And
Hmm.
then you think with these baddies who have everything else covered, right? I mean, they've got the explosions covered, the plan to get the money, the remote control train. They even with the remote control train, they have to put it over a bridge. The explosion happens at a bridge, and they know to slow the train down as they get to the bridge. They have everything else covered, but they don't take care of the disc. They don't put it in they don't have a jewel case or anything like that for it.
It's even weird that they would choose a disc, given that,
Right.
earlier in the film we've seen, like you said, this big bulky memory card and stuff. That's supposed to be like new, exciting
Right.
technology. I mean, CDs have been around for 15 years or so at this point. So it
Right.
seems odd that they're going somewhat old school.
Right, exactly. Well, and the other thing too is that the very first time when Carol Alt is the one who's having giving the codes away for the clients that she represents, we hear the dial-up modem. They use a dial-up modem sound effect when he's getting that money. So I guess in that sense, like this upload was going to take a while. It seems like, but I guess they were going to be like, no, we're going to put the disc up in the satellite thing. We'll be fine.
They're tapping into the phone lines in this train tunnel, I guess, so they
Right,
can connect their
exactly.
modem.
Right, right, exactly. Yeah, it's kind of a trip, and it's it's almost like I guess the moment we knew there was a disc, we knew it had to be a MacGuffin somehow, and so that's what happens. And so the Smith guy realized like, okay, the computer guy lost the disc, so we need leverage with Jack Wild. And so initially they were going to take the wife of the Australian guy, and I don't know why they were going to pick her, but they were going to take her. And then instead, Carol Alt volunteers herself. And it's funny because the reason she volunteers herself and they don't want to necessarily take her, she explains, well, I'm a friend of Jack's, which is really weird. It's like she's giving that away to them.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's also weird that they just don't go for her initially, because she
Right.
kind of, in some ways, I think they perceive her kind of like, the leader
Right.
in some ways. Always when you have a group of hostages, a leader presents themselves. I mean, it's John McClane's wife, in in Die Hard, that type of a thing here. Um, so it just seems odd that they wouldn't go for her initially, or that you didn't really have a moment where, it's something clues them in that she's tied to Jack in some way. That the fact that she just has to come out and tell them, oh yeah, he's my friend. It's like normally you would have that moment, that reveal, where Hans Gruber discovers the family photo, that type of
Yes.
thing that makes you realize, oh, these two are connected.
Yeah. Yeah, because I guess right because they're only it's weird with their relationship, right? Because we don't know how serious they are. That she might have a picture or something on her, but there are things that could have I mean for 1997, right? Cell phones were we see them in this movie, but they're still pretty new.
They're
So
new,
at that
yeah.
time, you were still writing down phone numbers. So I mean that would have been the easiest thing, right? Is that like Jack's work number or something like that is in her bag. And like, what do you mean Jack's work number? Whatever, and or something, like something like that could have been an easy enough reveal that they could have
Mhm.
found on her person and been like, okay, she's related to Jack somehow. Let's, or even better, right? It could have been instead of the photo, it could have been one of the, like he's been in and out, right, all these times. And so it could have been like that woman who's being held hostage. This is what I thought was actually going to happen was that the woman that they were initially going to take was going to sell her out. Be like, you don't want me. She's the one who's friends with the guy,
Right.
and that
She
that's what I
already
thought was
sold
going to
out the
happen.
Australian guy, so why not?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So that didn't wasn't how it happened, but either way, Smith and I guess I keep forgetting, I keep calling her our femme fatale. Her character name is Jasmine, but they take Carol Alt hostage, and they're climbing up to the top of this thing here. So which again, I guess if the film thought, okay, Carol Alt, she's in kind of like a business suit with a skirt and nylons. Um, I guess that if there was a point where they thought maybe she was too clothed, when they're going up the ladder, it's like, okay, get rid of the coat and also rip the skirt, so we can see more leg here. So they make sure we get more Carol Alt as she's climbing up this ladder for the kind of the end battle scene. But actually, before Reinhold can get to Carol Alt, he's got to have his end battle with Hans. And if I remember right, that wasn't all that memorable. It wasn't like a huge like
No,
kind of yeah.
it's not. Well, and one thing too, I got to throw out before that, because Hans is angry now. He's had that moment where he's talked with Smith, and he's like, I want to get this guy. And as a matter of fact, again, the Die Hard comparisons, he actually uses the line that Hans or Alexander Godunov's character uses in Die Hard. He goes, "I want blood." He does that right. Same thing, and it's like, oh my, we're really just ripping off Die Hard here,
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, considering the fact that he's for the first half of the movie set up as he's the big bad,
right,
until Smith comes into the picture, and so the showdown is it's not terribly memorable.
Yeah, and there is one thing where he says, "I didn't kill your wife," or something like that, and I don't know if that's supposed to mean that Smith killed his wife or
Christopher Plummer.
Like, no. Right, exactly, right, Christopher Plummer, right, exactly. So there's that kind of thing at the end, but the other thing too, right, is that it's like the place is starting to blow up, and so that's the other piece too. Is like that we've got explosions happening here, and so at the same time that Reinhold is dispatching of Becker, right? I remember. Oh, that's right. I completely forgot this piece that Reinhold shows up with the hostages and finds out that Carol Alt's been taken.
Right.
And he gives the train guy the phone and says, "I'll call. Don't call me. I'll call you." And the reason is that he has, when he finally catches up to Smith and Jasmine, who are holding Carol Alt hostage at the very top of this big shaft thing, he has rigged the CD with like a bomb in the middle.
Yeah.
Which and I don't even know what kind of bomb it is. It looks like one of those like bang snap things or something like that. Like kind of like the like if you're watching a movie that takes place in like Chinese New Year in a Chinatown in America, right? Those kind of little like firecracker kind of things.
It's just like, I mean, tape a couple of wires to a CD and yeah,
Right.
it's rigged with explosives.
Yeah. Now I'm trying to remember how this happened here. I probably should have taken a note on this, but it's like, so Smith is there with Jasmine, right? And there's a sense of them, being a couple or whatever. But then he kind of just does he? I thought he just like shoots her or something, and she falls down the shaft. Like
Yeah,
it's like
I think that's right. Yeah.
yeah. So he's not really willing to divide up this money at all. Which in 1997, $1 million on its own in 1997 was a good number. Nowadays you say, okay, $1 million, can you retire on that? That kind of, I mean, still, I mean, I would take $1 million. It's not like I'm saying it's nothing, but it's a good number. And I think these were like tens of millions of dollars that even if this Smith guy was dividing it up amongst the crew, and of course, as the shares, would go down, that like probably the grunts that Reinhold was killing off, they probably were in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it's like Smith would have made out okay, but I guess it's kind of like the old theory of like with billionaires, right? Where it's like to be a billionaire, you have to screw a lot of people over. You got to hurt a lot of people to make that kind of money. And that's the idea, right? That it's like, you don't think of it as like, oh, well, I could live pretty well on $20 million. It's like, but if I kill everybody else off, I get $40 million, which
Yeah,
is,
exactly.
right, exactly. And I think that's Smith's mindset. At this point, everybody else in his gang is dead, and he knows he can just have the money. And so the deal is that with this bomb setup here, um, they're trying to work out a deal between the two of them, between Reinhold and Smith. At the same time, all of the hostages are escaping through that tunnel, and we've got our Chekhov's rubble removal finally paying off here, right? That the hero's friend, while he's removing the rubble, they end up going to the same end tunnel to escape, and they just happen to hear him remove. They're removing rubble at the same time. They're doing sort of like a chain of all the hostages,
Right.
sort of carrying the foam through. Pretending it's really heavy as they carry it through. And they hear each other, and it's like, okay, excellent. They clear each other out, and it's hard to know if they get out just in time because we get that spray of water. I feel like they get out just in time to not be wet, not as opposed to being drowned or anything like that.
The
I don't know.
spray of water is weird. I mean, it's probably the cheesiest effect in the whole film because,
Yeah.
I mean, it literally looks like they, hooked up a couple of yard sprinklers and hit them behind some rocks, and we see the water spray out.
Right. Like what we didn't see were some kids like just sort of running across them, right?
Oh yeah,
on a hot day, yeah, to try to,
there's a slip and slide in the tunnel. Yeah.
exactly. So everybody's out, and the heroes, the friend is like, well, what happened to Jack? Well, he's still in there. He's got to go get his girlfriend. Oh, okay, all right. Well, hopefully we'll find, or whatever. And so Reinhold is having this very tense back and forth with Smith about trying to get Carol Alt to defuse the bomb. That's the idea, is that it's got to be Carol Alt to do it for whatever reason. I think it's because they don't want to be too close to each other, right? Because they might, it might ruin the whole deal thing that they've got going on here.
Mm-hmm.
So Carol Alt has to defuse the bomb, and at the same time, oh right, the bomb is hooked up to. It's wired to the cell phone that Reinhold has.
Mm-hmm.
Or is it a cell phone or is it like a walkie-talkie? I can't remember if it's like.
I mean, cell phone technology changed. I mean, it was a lot more crude back then,
Yeah,
but it does look a bit like a walkie-talkie more than a cell phone.
yeah. So the idea is that if he activates it, it will activate the bomb. And part of the reason why he was telling his friend not to call him, I'll call you, was I think the idea was that as a last resort, he would detonate the bomb.
Mm-hmm.
And so we get, from me, like one of the toughest things I've seen in a movie in a long time, which is this tense scene between, Carol Alt trying to defuse the bomb and Smith and Reinhold watching and trying to figure out what's going on, while back outside, the friend has discovered that the train guy has a way to communicate directly with Reinhold, and he wants the phone to communicate with him. And we know if he activates that phone, it will activate the bomb. And so we're seeing the two of them fight over this phone. It's like interspersed. The fighting over the phone is interspersed with this tense scene. And I was like, just get the two of them out of there. I don't want to deal with them fighting. I don't know if that affected you the same way.
It's a ridiculous sequence. I mean, they're running around like 6-year-olds, fighting over something, and it feels like they're trying to play it for comedic effect, but yeah, if you're cutting back and forth with what's supposed to be the big climax of the film, it's supposed to be this tense moment. It's really, I mean, I enjoyed these movies for what they are, but that is a poor choice for how you structure this.
Yeah. Yeah, because we just want to get this thing over with, and we don't want to deal with annoying people at that time. And that's, I
Mhm.
mean, that friend character was just really annoying, right? It's just like, not listening to the other guy, telling him don't, all that stuff. It's just like, and of course, because we know what it means for him to use the phone, and we're like, just stop, just, so there's that. The other thing I completely forgot to mention is in that opening scene where that early scene where Judge Reinhold breaks into Carol Alt's apartment and, gets into bed with her. She gives him like this kind of like over the shoulder throw kind of thing, and
Right, yeah.
throws him on the floor. So Chekhov's judo hold there we have, because we're now at the end of the movie and she's defused the bomb. She's sort of really scared at this point. She's saying she can't give the disc to because she can't move, which makes sense, right? You're defusing a bomb and you're like hundreds of feet up in the air, or tens of, whatever, 30. I don't know. It's you're really high up. So it's scary, right? And so there's some sort of tension there. And then finally, Smith is like, okay, I'm going to take the disc from you. And when he comes down to get it, she gives him the judo over the shoulder throw and almost gets him off the edge there. But of course, right, we need our final Hans Gruber moment.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, of all the things that this movie rips off from Die Hard, this is the one. I mean, we basically have the exact same moment as, Hans Gruber falling off the building in Die Hard. He's holding on to her arm, and Reinhold's there holding her, just like Bruce Willis is with Bonnie Bedelia. It's staged exactly the same way, except there's no watch. The only thing
Yes.
missing is the watch.
Right. Yeah, and it's almost like I don't know exactly if if it's like Sarrazin just he can't hold on anymore and he slips, or because Reinhold's telling him to let her go, which didn't make any sense either, because he's like, let her go. It's like, but this is his only life. He's gonna die if he lets her
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's gonna listen to you on that one,
Yeah.
but and it's a kind of this Michael Sarrazin, like he has no emotion throughout the film. I mean, the only time really that he has any emotion, I think, is when he's sort of calling into question Hans Becker's his work record, and sort of giving him a performance review, on his or giving him some feedback on his work, in not getting rid of Judge Reinhold. For the rest of it, he's very calm. He's just very like, I don't care. And that
Mhm.
is here too. When he's about to die, he's just kind of just sitting there. It's like, guess I'm gonna die. I guess that's what's
Well,
gonna happen here.
he does kind of have a bit of this like hangdog expression, kind of like, some kid where you took away his candy bar or
Yeah.
something like that. It's like, oh, well, woe is me.
Right, exactly.
And then he
Right.
drops.
Yeah, it's like the older brother took it away, and he just was like, "Oh, I guess I'm not getting a candy bar today because my
Yeah.
something like that." Yeah, yeah,
Today or any day, because you're about to die at the bottom of a shaft. Yeah.
right, exactly. And then when he falls, now we've already gotten it. What's interesting about this is we've already gotten a taste of what the fall looks like, because when the femme fatale is shot um by Smith, she falls. And so we know what this effect is going to look like. So it's almost like they're just going like, we're even going to make it look like Hans Gruber falling off the
Yeah.
building.
Yeah.
And they do it. They just, when he falls in, and of course, what happens is he disappears into the darkness of the tunnel.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, in some ways, having that happen to the femme fatale just a few minutes earlier steals some of the thunder. It
Right.
seemed an odd choice that you're going to do that twice.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think I think that's the thing with this movie, is that like it's almost like they had too many characters or something. I don't know exactly, because they didn't have too many characters, but it is almost like they got to the end of the movie and they're like, how are we going to get this down to just Smith and Wilde? Um, and they had to figure out how to do it, and it was like, okay, well, the femme fatale character, like, how are we going to kill her off? And I wonder too if part of the thing with the femme fatale is that it can be sometimes be difficult when you have the femme fatale and a male hero to have have a battle between them, because there's that sense of like, a guy hitting a woman
Right.
doesn't, especially with the hero, doesn't come off well. And I wonder if that was the problem. Is I wonder if they normally would have had the two, like, had her stay behind and fight Reinhold while Smith took Carol Alt up to the top place. That's where the final battle was. But they felt like it would have been unseemly to have, which, to be honest, I think if it was Thomas Ian Griffith or Steven Seagal or something like that, I would have agreed. Judge Reinhold fighting the femme fatale, actually, I would have been okay with.
Or, the thing that you could have done too is have, you know, you dispense with Smith, the femme fatale, Jasmine is still there, and then have, Carol Alt be the one that gets rid of her. Makes me think of, like, in Superman 2, where Lois Lane, grabs Ursa once they realize that the powers have been taken away from the three Kryptonian bad guys, and she's like, "Hey, you know what? You're a real pain in the neck," and she punches her, and then she falls into the chasm there.
Yes, no, that's a great point too, because that's the other way around it, right? Is that Carol, and it would have given Carol Alt. I mean, yes, it was great that she did the shoulder throw of Smith, so she did get that moment in there. But it would have been a really great kind of age, give her some agency, some more agency in the movie. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's like they kind of wrote themselves in a hole there. And then of course the other thing that's been happening throughout this movie is that there are bombs everywhere. I mean, these baddies have put. I mean, I don't know, like the ability of these baddies to place bombs in places. They've got them everywhere, and of course there's one near where this rooftop, or this kind of top of the shaft thing that they're at, and the bomb goes off, right? And it's kind of like Carol sees the bombs go off, she's like, what do we do? And he's just like, duck. And that's what they do. Uh, and then, once they've survived it, they call. And of course, Reinhold's definitely, I think he's enjoying the scene where he's got Carol Alt in his arms. I think, if you're Judge Reinhold and you're doing this film, right, that's one of the few pieces that you get, right, that you can.
Sure.
Yeah. And so he's just loving this, and he just gets on the phone and calls the train guy, and it's like, oh yeah, that's me, and then of course we end the movie with the friend complaining about Jack Wilde getting his helicopter blown up, which I guess is supposed to be kind of an offbeat comedic end to the movie.
Well, and isn't there a line too at the end where they suddenly now Jack and the girlfriend Carol Alt are talking about their honeymoon or something
That's
like that.
right.
But apparently now they're going to get married,
That's
and
right.
and there's a line something along the lines of no trains though.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and then I think we hear like the wedding sounds with the high speed train going through Europe.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like the last scene is that high speed train moving through Europe there, and then we go to the credits. So I mean, this is a movie that like I think for low budget or low budget direct to video kind of action fans, it's a classic because of the Reinhold factor. Yeah, I don't know how you felt kind of after you'd consumed this one.
I mean, I enjoyed it. It's one of those movies that you just kind of roll with. It's
Right.
it's always fun, when you're watching these it's Die Hard butt movies to see those comparisons and see the things that they just stole outright and then the things they tried to do a little bit different. I mean, I think the biggest novelty of this film is just the idea that you've got Judge Reinhold as an action star. That was something that was kind of like, okay, I need to see that. I'm not sure it's going to turn out well, but I need to see that. But I mean, I did enjoy it. I will say though, like I said, I did my homework. I was like, okay, if I'm going to watch Crackerjack 2, I'm going to watch Crackerjack 1 first. And I liked Crackerjack 1 quite a bit more than the second one. I think it's a better film. I think that Thomas Ian Griffith is, sells me more in this type of role. Like I said, I thought Natasha Kinski was quite good in the film, and on the whole, I think when it comes to Die Hard ripoffs, I prefer Die Hard in a ski resort over Die Hard in a train tunnel. So yeah, but I think both of them were fun, and I will at some point check out Crackerjack 3, which my understanding is does not involve Jack Wilde at all, from what I've read. So I'm curious how that works because I mean the whole title Crackerjack is supposed to be, I think in the first film that comes from he's a little crazy. He's crackers, Crackerjack.
Exactly.
So if
Right.
there's no more Jack, I don't know how that works, but whatever.
Yeah, exactly. I haven't seen that one yet either. It is on Tubi. Yeah, like you said, it's supposed to be, it's got an actor, Olivier Gruner, who is in our direct-to-video connoisseur Hall of Fame. So I probably should review it at some point to get. I mean, this is one that I've been meaning to do for a long time as well. That like all the other kind of sites in our ecosystem have covered this one at some point. So I've been meaning to do this one for a while myself. But yeah, that other one I've heard is supposed to be really bad. I think it's just again this producer Lloyd Samandel I'm just gonna label things Crackerjack. Eventually, what happens with Lloyd Samandel, if you look at his IMDb page, once he like not long after this, like maybe like a few years after Crackerjack 3, he just starts doing just like these women in bondage, white slavery movies. That's really what his IMDb bio is.
Mm.
Yeah, so
One thing I didn't mention earlier on though that was through both the movies was a little bit of a hurdle for me was the fact that our lead character's name is Jack Wilde, because in my brain, I associate that with there's a child actor whose name was Jack Wilde. For kids of the '70s, like I was, he was the human actor on the show HR Puffin Stuff.
oh yes, yeah.
And he kind of came to prominence a few years before that because he played the Artful Dodger in the movie Oliver, and then from there was on Puffin Stuff, and that was that's an iconic '70s kids show, so whenever I heard that name through these movies when they were Jack Wilde is after us, and I was like, what, the kid from HR Puffin
Right,
Stuff?
right. Just imagine. Oh, we got a siren coming by here. I don't know if you could hear that, but yeah, just imagining like a flute like running after, like a puppet flute running after after Judge Reinhold.
Freddie the Flute.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny. So growing up as a kid, like that HR Puffin Stuff would be on Saturday mornings before like the other cartoons would be on. It would be like so if I got up at like 6 in the morning on a Saturday, HR Puff and stuff, or Sigmund the Sea Monster was another one that would be on. So that's how I remember those. But it's funny because that didn't last that long, and so
Just
like if
one season. They
yes,
made just one season, but they reran it
right.
endlessly.
Exactly, yeah. And like I think by like the 90s, they had just done away with that. Like they weren't doing HR Puff and stuff on anything. I think the other one was Banana Splits was the same thing. It was like by
Oh,
the early 90s, they were like, we're not showing that even early in the morning like that. We're just not doing it. So it's funny, like if I have like coworkers that are younger and I'll make do like a GIF from HR Puff and stuff or something in one of our chats, they're like, what is that? What the hell is it? It's like,
I tell you, I mean, those shows were so much fun, and I mean, I gravitated towards them. I don't remember if I mentioned this the last time I was on
yeah,
the show or not, but I know I've told you I have a background in puppetry. I've worked as a professional puppeteer and such, and so those shows were created by Sid and Marty Krofft, who are kind of iconic in the puppetry realm. And so when I became a parent and such, I was of course exposing my kids to those shows, and it amazed me how my kids, my daughter was born in 99, my son was born in 2002, so way far removed from when these shows were originally out, but they loved them. My daughter, still one of her favorites is the Bugaloos. She
yes.
loved the Bugaloos.
Yeah. Yeah, it was one of those things that I think for me as a kid, like there was a little bit of being scared by it, like it's like early in the morning and I don't know what's on TV and it's like, oh, here's, HR Puff and stuff. And I'm like, there's a little bit, there was like a little fear involved. And then it was like kind of like easing into it, being like, oh, okay, all right, this isn't so bad. Like this works. Yeah, it's kind of funny when you think like, because with kids programming kind of after, it was like very about educational stuff, and it was like like the kind of stuff that they would do is very different from what was in the 70s and into the 80s. But like that stuff still works. Like it's like you said, you can show it for younger generations and they get a kick out of it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and of course, I mean those shows, especially the ones that the Crofts created,
Yeah.
they had a bit of a psychedelic vibe to them. So, the people that like to indulge in certain things
Yes.
have shown a preference for those shows as well.
Right. Exactly. Which is what makes the Banana Split so funny. Because I remember I came back to that because Boomerang was showing it in the late 2000s, and I was like, oh, let me check out this Banana Split show. And it's like whereas HR Puff and stuff would be like kind of a fun trip if you were engaging in certain pastimes. Banana Splits was a bad trip. Like if you took anything while watching Banana Splits, I think it would just be like it would be like a Dragnet episode where you just come crashing out of the window and at the end of the episode, right? Where like it's like you kids doing the demon weed, that's kind of what that's what Banana Splits was.
Growing up in the 70s, watching that stuff on reruns was awesome, man.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, I mean Hanna-Barbera in general, they just whatever they were taking and just turning it into. I mean, I always joked that like that the Avengers was kind of like the best team up since Laugh Olympics. That was like
Oh,
uh,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, where you get you
I,
just
I'm
oh
I'm
go
still
ahead.
holding my breath for someone to do a live action version of the Wacky Races.
Yes,
That was like my favorite of those Hanna-Barbera ones. And there's like a commercial.
yes.
I want to say it's like a German commercial or something. I don't even know what it's for. I think it's a car commercial. But they did these live action versions of the Wacky Races characters. I was like, this is awesome. Somebody needs to do this for real, man.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they would have gotten there if more of the cartoon adaptations that happened in the 90s had been successful. I think,
Mhm.
they were on their way there. I think like if like the Flintstones had been bigger, I think if the Scooby-Doo one had been bigger. I guess that one was the early 2000s, wasn't it? That Scooby with like Sarah Michelle Gellar
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, that was like I think if they had been more successful, that would have been because that's right. The Josie and the Pussycats one, that one didn't do anything. That one was like
Oh, but that's such a great movie. I
it
tell
is.
you, there's so many layers to that thing. When I
Yes.
watched that movie, I was like, this movie is ahead of its time. This is
Yes.
great.
Yeah, with the boy band and everything, with Seth Green, I think, right?
Yeah.
Was he? Yeah, like uncredited as one of the boy band members. I mean, that yeah, they did some stuff with that movie for
Well,
sure.
and the soundtrack is great. That Josie
Yes,
and the Pussycats album that they put
yeah,
out with that thing is a great album.
yeah, Yeah, it's one of those things where like movies like that like there's like that difference that disconnect between what the studios are looking for and what people are looking for, and it's like sometimes a movie like a Josie and the Pussycats, it needs to marinate, that it needs to be out there and people need to
Hmm.
discover it. But from the studio standpoint, they're like, well, it doesn't do anything in the box office, so we're not going to greenlight another one of those movies, and so that's it. It's done. But on the other hand, it like kind of it has that ability to build like an audience where people can can watch it that way. And yeah, it's interesting. It's gonna be, thinking about blockbuster stuff like that now. Like I think like a movie like the Marvels that came out last year might be like that kind of movie, but it's like if you have a budget of 200 plus million, it can't marinate, right? It needs to jump out of the gate doing a whole bunch
Right.
of money. And yeah, I think Josie and the Pussycats, I think there was almost like a fatigue of those kinds of movies at that time. Um, and it's too bad because it's like if that had been like one of the first ones of those kinds of movies, it probably would have done better, and it might have even led to more more inspired versions of some of the other ones.
I think that movie has marinated because I seem to remember. I think the 20th anniversary of it was a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
Was it like 2001 that movie? I
I
think,
think
but
so.
yeah, I remember when it came out, or when we hit like the anniversary of its release, and I posted something on Facebook. Oh yeah, this is the 20th anniversary of Josie and the Pussycats, and just looking across Facebook and Twitter and such, I saw so many people that were reacting to the fact that that movie had hit 20 years, saying, oh, I love this movie, I love this
Yes.
movie. I was like, it's great to see that this movie has found its audience, because yeah,
Yeah.
it got completely ignored back in the day, but it is such a fun movie.
Yeah, yeah, because you're right. I have. I mean, I don't remember the last time I've seen it, but it is one of those things. Like, yeah, when you see the reviews, people say ahead of its time. Like it's like it's almost like 2001 wasn't ready for that movie.
Mhm.
It's it wasn't but like you said, like people discovered it because I think that was the thing back then is that if you had a movie like this that had names in it, people would find it somehow, like whether they, get the DVD of it, maybe it's like a rental thing where everybody's like, okay, what haven't we seen yet? And it's like, okay, enough people hadn't seen Josie and the Pussycats in the theater, so let's just rent it. And it's like, oh, this is actually isn't too bad, or you know.
Mhm.
On cable or something like that. It's interesting because now with the whole ecosystem completely having changed since 2001, like how many movies we're going to get like a Josie and the Pussycats where like it comes out and it doesn't have any it sort of like you said it marinates for a while. It doesn't just start off big or something like that.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but yeah, and of course this is a movie that we were talking about Crackerjack too, that it could marinate for years, right? You could have it in that Ziploc bag with all of the ceviche sauces or spices and all of that stuff in it, and it's always going to be Crackerjack too. Like, this is not one that was not, it was initially, I don't even know how it was received when it first came out, but it's again, it's grown into being a classic just because of the what do I want to say, like the novelty factor that you've got Judge Reinhold as an action star. And, when he's covered in soot and he's, just sort of, just kind of shucksing it while he's beating people up and blowing people up. There's I don't know if charm is the right word for it, but there is definitely something there.
It's yeah, I mean, it's a weird mix of trying to do the action hero thing, but you're still kind of maintaining some of that goofiness that we associate with Judge Reinhold. So yeah, it's an odd choice. I after watching this, I mean, I'm not going to say that this film succeeds on every level. It's
Right.
entertaining, and there is maybe that morbid corner of my brain that would be interested in seeing more of the Judge Reinhold action universe, just because it's just such a strange thought, So you know, I had fun with it. I mean, tied me over till we see him return as Billy Rosewood again here
Yes.
later this year in the next Beverly Hills Cop movie.
Exactly, because actually he hasn't worked since 2017. His next thing on his docket is that Beverly Hills Cop movie. So I'm not sure what that means for him. I mean, he did a Christmas movie in 2017. So I wonder if he just wasn't getting the parts he wanted. But this will be the first time he's worked since 2017 as
Oh,
this new Beverly Hills Cop movie. So I think you're right. Like we all needed a little something to tide us over, and I I guess thinking about when cinema was invented in the late 19th century, the people who invented it couldn't have conceived of this. And I don't think us, even in the 80s, watching him in Beverly Hills Cop or Fast Times at Ridgemont High or Gremlins, we couldn't have conceived of this either. But we got it, and I guess I don't know if lucky is the right word to say that we've got this, but we have it, right? And it's just this fun quirk in the film world.
Absolutely. Yep.
Now, as we wrap up here, Todd, actually, before we wrap, anything else about this movie that you wanted to mention? Anything we missed?
I think we pretty well covered it. I mean,
Yeah.
I would say, like I was kind of hinting at before, I think, I mean, certainly check this one out, but check out the first one too. I think
Yes.
the first one is a more interesting movie. I mean, it's still got, a lot of quirks to it that we see in the direct-to-video stuff, but the first one is fun.
Yes, it's a more fun movie. It's more fun in that Die Hard in a. It's like a kind of a better version of a Die Hard in a movie.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now as we're finishing up here, Todd, anything that you'd like to plug?
Well, of course, I'll never pass the opportunity to plug my podcast. My podcast is called the Forgotten Filmcast, and you can find that on all the places where you find various podcasts. We, like you were saying earlier, we cover a wide variety of different stuff. Just in the last couple episodes, we've done everything from a kind of forgotten Sharon Stone film before she became a big star. We did Scissors. We did Clint Eastwood's The Gauntlet a few weeks ago, and the most recent episode was about a kind of techno thriller virtual reality thing from 1999 called The 13th Floor. So we go all over the map when it comes to different forgotten films.
Yeah, the 13th Floor is another one like that. I remember I saw Craig Bierko in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and I hadn't seen him in anything else. And I was like, this Craig Bierko guy, he seems like he's a bigger deal. And then I remember seeing 13th Floor on the video store shelves, and I was like, oh, that's him. That's the guy from I was like, there he is. He's in something else. And so, but it was one of those things like that movie kind of snuck up, I guess. I kind of remember it being in the theater a little bit, but it's definitely an interesting one.
Yeah, I mean, again, I won't say that it succeeds on every level. There's some interesting things going on there, but yeah, I mean, Bierko, he's one of these guys that I was watching the movie. I was like, well, I know him from stuff, but he doesn't jump out of my mind. And actually, he kind of made me think about, he would be the kind of person we would see in some of the type of films that you talk about. It's just it seems like he might have found a niche in the direct-to-video market.
Yeah, yeah, he would have been great in those, like, like the SWAT sequels, or those kinds of things. You could see him, Bierko, with like the helmet and the SWAT gear, like
Hmm.
just like yelling things into like like a handheld walkie-talkie thing or something like that, while like a jerk kind of guy like a Parmenter is
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
selling him out kind of thing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and also quickly on the Gauntlet, when we were talking about TV on independent stations, Gauntlet was one that I remember being on a lot. I don't know that I don't remember how many times I saw it in pieces before I actually watched it from beginning to end. I think it was like, I saw the end of it first and then saw the middle at one time. It was one of those kinds of deals.
This was the first time I had ever seen the film. So I was like, okay, I'm going to take this opportunity. Toby Rohn, who was my guest on that, he's a guy that's written a number of books. He's done commentary tracks on some DVDs and such. And he took it upon himself to write a whole book about the making of the Gauntlet. So I was like, okay, he just released the book. Let's talk about this movie on the show. He's like, oh yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. It's one of those ones. I think Clint Eastwood was one of those ones that, like, I think my dad was a big fan of him. Like Pacino was one for my parents, where it's like if there's a Pacino movie on, they didn't change the channel. They would just,
Yeah.
and that was how I saw like Dog Day Afternoon and Serpico and all those. But Eastwood was another one that was like, okay, if there's an Eastwood movie on, my dad wasn't changing the channel, and so that was
Right.
how I saw a lot of those
Right.
movies. Was that he was a fan, but the Gauntlet was one that I remember. Like I remember them advertising. It was like it was that Eastwood was one of those deals in on that WSBK channel where it was like, okay, we've got a Clint Eastwood movie here, everybody, there was no setting your DVR back then, right? It was like everybody get your popcorn ready and watch this movie. And so, yeah, that one I think Play Misty for me. Yeah, I can't remember the one where he was hanging on with a chimpanzee or an orangutan, but
Oh, well, yeah. Well,
uh,
Every Which Way But Loose
every which way,
and
yeah,
Any Which Way You Can, which I
right,
think the I get them mixed up. I think it's the first one.
yeah,
Actually, the big conclusion to that movie, the big fight with the biker gang,
right,
was filmed in Idaho Springs, Colorado, which is not terribly far away from where I am. So yeah.
yeah. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, yeah. That was. I mean, yeah. It seemed like Clint Eastwood was just always on. It was. Obviously the westerns were always on too. It just like there was no shortage of Clint Eastwood, and of course
Oh, well,
Rawhide.
I mean, that's the thing. He's
Yeah.
so, dependable. You
Yes.
know that every year Eastwood's going to be putting out another movie,
Yeah.
or two,
Yeah.
he's going to direct one, he's going to star in another one,
Yeah.
I mean, him and Woody Allen, at
Yes.
least one movie every year.
Right, right, exactly. Yeah, and I guess the difference between the two is that Woody Allen was like doing it on the cheap, and he was just like, his casting director was just like, "Hey, do you want to just work with Woody Allen? 'Cause we
Yeah.
can't pay you, but if you want to just work with him, he's making a movie." But people were like, "Okay, yeah, all
The
right,
two
I'll
are
do."
interchangeable. Come
Yeah,
on. I mean, you can stick Woody into an Eastwood movie and put Eastwood into a Woody movie.
yeah. It is funny that he never did that. That Woody Allen. You'd think Woody Allen, because he did so many of those kind of ironic things with him as the lead, that he didn't do a Dirty Harry. Yeah, that would have been interesting.
It actually would have been funny if one day suddenly like Eastwood had shown up, because it always amazes me, like, sometimes when you look at the cast of, like a Woody Allen movie, and suddenly there's these people that show up in there,
Yes.
and you're going, I would have never expected to have like, like Dan Aykroyd show up
Right,
in a Woody Allen movie, or Tiffany Amber Thiessen from Saved
right.
by the Bell, shows up in a Woody Allen movie. It's like, so all these people. Andrew Dice Clay is in a Woody Allen movie. It's like, how does this happen?
Right. Well, yeah, star of this film, Carol Alt. If you go to her IMDb page, To Rome with Love, that's her like
Oh,
one of her
really?
top four. Yeah, she
Mhm.
did that. I mean, I was thinking of people that you wouldn't expect in a Woody Allen movie. Oh, who was it that I was thinking of that that did one? Oh my, oh, I can't believe I had it and I just lost it. Who was it was in one kind of recently. Oh man, I can't believe it. But yeah, Carol. Oh, Elizabeth Berkley.
Oh,
So
yeah.
yeah, I remember my buddy and I were in LA because his mom lives in San Diego, and we went and did a day in LA. We got tickets to the Craig Kilborn show, and she was on there promoting Curse of the Jade Scorpion, and it was like kind of her like showgirls redemption tour.
Yeah.
She was like, "Oh, I'm in a Woody Allen movie. Please don't hold showgirls against me anymore." And we were just kind of like, we don't even know what's going on here. We're just in the Craig Kilborn show. They're like pumping crowd noise in and stuff like that because it's such a small studio audience. And it's like, yeah, this isn't what's going to get you there, unfortunately, Elizabeth Berkley. Exactly. Well, Todd, this was a great conversation. Had a great time talking Judge Reinhold and Crackerjack 2 with you.
Yeah, it was great. I appreciate the invites. Always game to talk about more of these films with you. So yeah, fantastic.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And yeah, we'll be back soon. Bye, everyone.